Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you to the 6th Annual Georgian Bay Healthcare, Wellness, Research and Innovation Day. My name is Dr. Michael Lisi, and I'm the Chief of Staff here at the Collingwood General Marine Hospital. I will be the facilitator for today's event, which is a collaboration between the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital, the Rural Ontario Medical Program, Georgian College, the Town of the Blue Mountains, the Town of Clearview, the Town of Collingwood, and the Town of Wasaga Beach. Our theme this year is COVID Wellness. Our aim today is to give you the opportunity to learn and explore some of the great research and initiatives taking place locally in Southern Georgian Bay, as well as around the world. In ideal circumstances, this event would be hosted live at CGMH, as in previous years. Upon receiving positive feedback from last year's adapted virtual event, and considering the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we are returning this year with a live streaming platform so that we may continue to share knowledge and innovation from across the globe. For those of you who attended this event in the past, you will recall we had a large display of research posters lining the halls of the hospital. Similar to last year, these posters are available online at the CGMH and Rural Ontario Medical Program online events websites, which are displayed on the screen. It is our hope that you will browse through these posters, which will highlight the outstanding initiatives being done around our area, and reach out virtually to have further conversations about local innovative research. We are very excited that you are all able to join us, and I want to thank those who have tuned into the live stream to participate in today's event, and of course our 8 speakers who are lending their time and expertise. If you have any specific questions for the speakers, please use the chat box below the live stream on YouTube. As I mentioned, our focus for Research Day this year is COVID Wellness. The ongoing global pandemic has impacted us all personally and professionally, which has had a significant impact on mental health. Hopefully the event will answer some questions you may have, as well as prompt you to think about healthcare moving forward as we continue to adapt and manage amidst COVID-19. Before we get started with our speakers, I want to thank a few individuals who helped to make today happen. From our partners, Jennifer Parker from the Town of Collingwood, Mayor Doug Measures from Clearview Township, the Town of Blue Mountains, Township of Wasaga Beach, Dr. Peter Wells and Michelle Hunter from the Rural Ontario Medical Program, Jacqueline Limoges, Marilyn Houghton, and Veronique from Georgian College, and our team here at CGMH. Thank you. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers presenting today and some great opportunities to network virtually with stakeholders from a variety of professional backgrounds. As this is an interprofessional event, be sure to ask questions, connect with, and learn from these professionals that you may not otherwise have had the chance to interact with in your scope of practice. We truly are stronger together. Welcome, and please enjoy our presentations. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker of the day, Dr. Craig Beach. He's a board-certified general and forensic psychiatrist, forensic expert, health systems consultant, educator, and healthcare administrator. He has gained a depth of experience in his field by having trained and worked in Canada, United Kingdom, and the United States. Currently, however, he's based in the USA as the Quality Improvement Lead at the San Diego County Psychiatric Hospital. He graduated from McMaster's DeGroote Medical School in 2003 and went on to do his residency in Toronto, closely followed by a master's in forensic psychiatry at King's College in London, UK in 2004. He also spent time as an assistant professor in departments of psychiatry at both the University of Toronto and McMaster University. Clinically, Dr. Beach has over 15 years of experience working with patients experiencing a variety of mental health challenges. As a forensic expert, he specializes in risk assessment and management, including civil and criminal forensic mental health evaluations. Currently, much of his practice is done virtually via telehealth, which has become particularly essential since the onset of the pandemic. We are honored to have Dr. Beach as the first speaker in a 2-part presentation about adversity and psychological resilience, thriving in the mental health aftermath of COVID-19. Speaking with Dr. Beach, we also have Stephanie Robinson, who is also based in San Diego, where she is the Chief of Quality and Client Experience at Open Mind Health, which provides exceptional mental wellness telehealth services. She is a psychotherapist and life coach with 20 years of experience treating a variety of mental health challenges. She is also experienced in team building, business administration, and leadership, having worked with individuals and teams as a mentor, life coach, and clinical supervisor. She works with families, individuals, and groups to work through trauma, addiction, helplessness, frustration, loss, guilt, compassion, fatigue, and relationship issues. It is a privilege to have her speak today as a continuation of Dr. Beach's presentation for part 2 of the Adversity and Psychology Resilience, Thriving in the Mental Health Aftermath of COVID-19 presentation. And now we'll open it up and we'll see if Dr. Beach and Stephanie are available to take the floors.
Good morning. Can everyone see our slides okay? Just wanting confirmation that you can hear Stephanie and I before we get started. Perfect.
Thanks, guys. So
okay.
We see you and hear you. Okay, slides are up. Great, thanks, guys.
Good morning, and thanks for the introduction. Stephanie and I are really excited to be here today to open up this morning's conference. And we'll be speaking about adversity and psychological resilience, thriving in the mental health aftermath of COVID. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Lisi for inviting Open Mind Health, and thanks the ROMPS team, CTRE Production Company for their assistance, and also CGMH for assisting with and hosting this conference. As a native Penetanguishiner, I have so many fond memories of Georgian Bay and Collingwood, so it's nice to be back home, albeit virtually. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that neither Stephanie nor I have any disclosures or conflicts of interest. In terms of an overview, various members from Open Mind Health will be speaking throughout this morning, addressing COVID recovery from the holistic mind, body, and spirit perspectives. Our talk will focus specifically on psychological coping related to COVID recovery, including the psychological impacts of COVID, the power and importance of being open-minded, psychological resilience, the criticalness of finding adaptive as opposed to maladaptive forms of coping, and finally, the importance of creative magic and meaning making. It goes without saying that COVID has had a massive impact on people and their mental well-being. In terms of the mental health landscape, it's important to recognize that with the COVID pandemic, there's also a mental health pandemic, which has essentially increased all emotional and mental health conditions we know of, as well as most major societal concerns. But a few examples include trauma, depression, anxiety, isolation and loneliness, addiction, fatigue and exhaustion, violence, particularly domestic violence as people are spending more time together, hopeless and helpless feelings, and tragically, suicide. There are obvious acute stressors people are experiencing, but even more concerning are the many cumulative impacts of stressors that people are witnessing over time, which can lead to chronic stressors and trauma. If this weren't enough, the mental health pandemic is exacerbated for those who already have pre-existing vulnerabilities or risk factors, those from marginalized communities or populations, those with pre-existing health conditions, especially immunologic issues, older adults, and those from lower socioeconomic demographics, or who have less social support.
We know that the world is a dynamic place and it's ever changing. In fact, the only thing that's constant is change. We see, land structures disappearing, the Galapagos Islands, the Amazon rainforest. The only constant is change. Wonders of the world are disappearing. And in fact, the brain, the part of the brain, the amygdala, interprets change as a threat. And so what's important is that releases a hormone in our bodies for fight, flight, and freeze. However, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, but the ones that are most responsive to change.
And our need to weather life storms leads me to the importance and power of being open-minded, which was actually the impetus behind naming our mental wellness telehealth company, Open Mind Health.
This slide presents a dichotomy between closed and open mindsets. So you can see the differences here between avoiding challenge versus embracing a challenge, working through obstacles versus giving up easily, accepting and learning from criticism versus ignoring feedback. An open mind is one that's able to change, grow, pivot, adapt, learn, process new information, process emotions, seek reconciliation, resolution. All of those lead to improved coping, happiness, achievement, and success. So open-minded people are critical thinkers, they're lateral thinkers, they're open to possibilities, they're optimistic, strategic, they see solutions and opportunities through the crisis and are open to feedback. In contrast, a closed mind would be resistant to change, resistant to improvement over time, rigid, inflexible, and a more limited, narrow view, sort of a deprivation of spirit, actually.
For the mind is indeed a powerful thing. So powerful it can play tricks on us, lead us to become biased, and even have us jumping to conclusions. At the end of the day, however, doesn't so much about what we think and ultimately believe depend on our particular vantage point or perspective, or where we're standing, as in the graphic depicted here? Fortunately, as humans, we are capable of training ourselves to entertain many different perspectives. Don't they often say how valuable it is to walk a mile in someone else's shoes? In fact, in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which is an evidence-based psychotherapy commonly used for conditions like mental health and depression, such common mental traps are referred to as cognitive distortions, and time spent in CBT therapy is spent altering distorted beliefs, which have led people to become depressed and anxious. So open-mindedness requires the ability to challenge information and consider opposing views. We're all bombarded and experiencing information overload, but we need to remember that we always have the option to switch the channel. And believe it or not, even turn off the TV and shut out the noise. It's become such a problem these days in the age of social media that the concept of taking a break is referred to as taking a digital detox. And that break alone, repeated over and over, can be hugely therapeutic and empowering.
What Dr. Beach is trying to emphasize here is around confirmation bias, where we seek information that affirms what we already know rather than learning new things. In the slide here, you can see it's not seeking out objective facts. It's interpreting information to support your existing beliefs. You only remember the details that uphold your belief, and ignoring information that challenges your belief systems. So again, a closed mind. And I'm sure many of you can relate throughout COVID to friends, family, social media who did exactly this, where a little information is dangerous. Maybe you have examples where in the early COVID adaptations where conspiracy theories were thought of, widespread, and dangerous advice was rampant. The risk here is that incites fear.
The next portion of our talk focuses on the importance of psychological resilience. So what is psychological resilience? I find a practical way to define resilience is armor against adversity. And in general, you can contrast being resilient with being resistant, especially when you think of with respect to change. Some of the hallmarks of resilience include the ability of someone to return to a former successful trajectory after they've been impacted by an outside disturbance. The capacity of someone to recover from incurring losses or trauma, and the ability of a system or group of people to reorganize themselves and remain malleable and adaptive. Another way to think of it is our ability to pivot. And interestingly, one of our 14 featured wellness tracks at Open Mind Health is called Pivot, Planning in the Volatility of Our Times. And that's been particularly helpful for people during the COVID pandemic. Each of these hallmarks is really focused on embracing a dynamic way of existing versus expecting or clenching to stasis or stagnation. In other words, it's learning to see change as exciting versus threatening. And loss of resilience is often an early warning signal of an adverse event such as collapse. We all know, especially working in healthcare currently, there are significant risks of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. And so Stephanie and I would like to extend a special shout out and express deep gratitude to our healthcare heroes for all of their efforts and sacrifices during this long and exhausting COVID pandemic. And the real risks of burnout can't be underestimated and brushed under the proverbial carpet, as people may often appear to be doing okay now, but they can actually have a delayed response for what seems to be for no good reason when things are actually better. So please always be mindful and check in with folks who may be having a delayed trauma reaction.
What resilience is not is pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, whatever that actually means. An example of system and group resilience is how healthcare technology adapted. Healthcare workers experienced rapid learning in tech skills. We too experienced learning in tech skills for our PowerPoint presentation. Virtual care became better or used in places that had never even been seen before. After the initial crisis, many people dug deep and said the show must go on.
There are many models of resilience, but here's one by Kumar that I find useful, mainly because I can remember the 8 factors, which all begin with the letter C. Kumar's 8 factors shown here are indicated to increase psychological resilience, and they include connectedness, curiosity, especially intellectual curiosities, communication, control and one's sense of control, change acceptance versus change aversion, clarity of focus, confidence in oneself, as well as creativity, which Stephanie will be speaking about a little bit later in our talk. Yet another way to conceptualize resilience is by working towards building or strengthening our protective factors and reducing or eliminating our risk factors wherever possible. As you can see here, protective and risk factors can be viewed from individual, family, and community levels. Certainly this list here is by no means exhaustive, but examples of important individual protective factors include a feeling of being in control and a sense of cohesion, connection with close relationships, delayed gratification versus the need for immediate gratification, and possessing a good sense of humor. Examples of family protective factors include good parenting skills, trusting relationships with well-defined roles and responsibilities, and opportunities that emerge over time or that are even created over time to deal with silence, criticism, and rejection. And finally, protective community factors include a sense of belonging and contribution, a good peer social network, and the opportunity to handle challenges. Another psychological construct shown to be correlated with increased psychological resilience is having increased emotional intelligence, or EQ. And listed here are some of the common examples of individual traits that are associated with lower versus higher EQ. Another way I find it helpful to think of EQ is according to the 4 fundamental characteristics. The first 2 fundamentals of EQ relate to yourself. They are self-awareness, which includes an understanding and insight into yourself, and then self-management, which gets at how you cope and behave. The other 2 fundamentals of EQ relate to your interactions with others. They are social awareness, this time getting at your insight into, for example, reading social cues, and then social skills, what you say and how you behave when you're around others. Interestingly, Freud, who's the father of psychoanalysis and all things id, ego, and superego, worked with patients on building or fine-tuning what he called their observing ego, which is our ability to be present in a moment or situation with another, and at the same time be able to step back and observe yourself and challenge yourself in that moment. For example, a person with a well-developed superego would be able to ask critical questions in the moment, like, am I talking too much right now? And if they were, talk less. If they were distracted, listen more actively. Or am I checking my phone while she's talking to me? That's rude. And put your phone down in the moment, and ideally not repeat that behavior in the future. So in summary, observing ego is self-awareness paid with the opportunity for behavioral course correction in the moment. Psychological resilience is such a crucial protective armor that there are numerous scales developed to measure and enhance it. Here's but one called the Brief Resilience Scale, where you can see each item is on a 5-point Likert scale. And examples of items include, I tend to bounce back quickly after hard times, and I tend to have to take a long time to get over setbacks in my life.
And that leads us into the next section around adaptive coping. I found this a really interesting piece of information. Morbid curiosity was shown in research to correlate with increased psychological resilience. So a lot of people early on in the pandemic would have noticed themselves watching zombie movies and things like that. And what that shows is actually people are trying to expose themselves to the challenging situation around them and get their mind psychologically ready for it. So that was pretty interesting. And again, Dr. Beach has been talking about the importance of prevention and armor in that psychological resilience. So morbid curiosity, who knew? Serial killer movies were one of them. But in addition to that, there's also active coping styles. In the outside ring here, what you'll see is some of those active coping styles that we can do intentionally and mindfully. And that protects us from from the spiral of going down to that loss of control in the center of this slide. So passive coping skills are also called negative coping skills. And sometimes we don't realize that we're doing them. Withdrawal, avoidance, wishful thinking, projection, intellectualization, catastrophizing. And the most important part is that resilience can either be bolstered or compromised. And so another concept that we talk about is that locus of control. You see the slide here, where a person believes that they're an independent person in charge of their own destiny. I'm in control of my life as opposed to being controlled by outside influences. Outside influences can be beliefs in things such as fate, and they can often lead to sort of a sense of victimization. Humans seek power, control of their environment, and attach meaning to situations. Without that meaning, they can experience transitions and pivotal life changes as victim of circumstance. That leads us to creativity. When we have a sense of control over things that are in our lives, we can also channel those things into more creative outlets. Those passive coping things of avoidance turn into more active things, channeling that. So Isaac Newton, for example, in 1665, when he was forced to work from home because of the bubonic plague, was able to develop his theories on gravity, calculus, and optics. I'd be curious to see through the pandemic some of the innovative things that will come out from that. But I think humans just have a natural ability to create under stress. Creativity under constraints is how we'd like to think about that. The other part of that is also stepping outside of your comfort zones, which I think we need to do more actively and encourage each other to do that. I think as we come out of the pandemic, some of the things that we'll notice is people will hold tight to their more restricted ways of living, almost as if being in jail. You know, if you've ever worked with anybody who's been in jail and when they get out and how difficult and anxiety-producing freedom is actually. You don't even realize sometimes that you're living in a box or that you've restricted yourself. So I think, again, that's something to encourage yourselves and also to encourage each other. Another important thing to that goes with creativity is meaning making. You know, we see that through art. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist in the concentration camps. He was a Jewish psychiatrist in concentration camps, and he studied what sort of separated people who were able to thrive versus people who were not. And what he boiled it down to was a sense of control over how you choose to respond to situations. What he says here is, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment. It finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice.
So in summary, we hope you better understand the importance and power of being open-minded, that psychological resilience is a good thing, as it's armor against life's inevitable adversities. We can further protect ourselves through adaptive or positive forms of coping. And finally, the importance and benefits derived from engaging in creative pursuits, and the need to strive to engage in and find deeper meaning in our day-to-day lives. Excuse me. For example, right now, the talk of the COVID town may be all things Delta variant, but just as we humans adapt, so too do viruses. That's a virus's adaptive life cycle. Speaking of change, Stephanie, what do you predict the next one after Delta is going to be named?
Perhaps dawn.
Delta dawn, what's that flower you have on? Could it be a faded rose from days gone by? And did I hear you say she was taking you here today to take you to his mansion in the sky? Thank you very much.
Dr. Lisi, are there opportunities for questions?
Great. I love a good song, especially if, for an ending. Well done. Well done. Yeah, let's just see what's going on. We're receiving some questions, and team, we've got. Can you feed some of that forward to me now?
The sun's coming up here in San Diego.
Excellent. So yeah, they're just feeding that forward here to me. So yes, excellent song in the end, guys. That's thank you for your great talk. And it looks like we've got our first question here. What would be an example of pandemic-related cognitive distortion that you've seen, and how have you modified your practice of cognitive behavioral therapy to be more specific to these specific struggles?
I mean, I'll start, and I think Stephanie can probably fill that in. So examples of common cognitive distortions during COVID, one of the most typical would be catastrophizing, which is when you have a little bit of information and instead instead of maybe objectively analyzing the information from different perspectives, your mind automatically jumps to the worst possible scenario or to something being a catastrophe. Related to that, cognitive distortion or other cognitive distortions like black and white thinking. So again, it's the challenge that people can have thinking more in gray or all or nothing thinking. So all three of those examples are names of cognitive distortions, but they get at that challenge of sitting in the middle and tolerating ambiguity. So it's not just necessarily seeing things and jumping to conclusions is actually another cognitive distortion, but all of them get at that mind's tendency to want to understand things and make judgments. And our judgments tend to go to kind of extreme judgments because it can be more difficult and anxiety provoking to kind of sit in the middle and know that, you know, things are uncertain.
Yeah, and along that line, I'm seeing a lot of folks who are having sort of existential crisis, feeling as though God's left the building, the world is ending, and that's kind of being perpetuated, feeling like they're out of control of things, that the government is controlling things, feeling like they don't have any choices. I think a lot of humanistic psychotherapeutic approaches can work. Again, that searching for meaning, looking for opportunities for legacy making. Some exposure therapies are helpful too. I know lots of people who have been afraid to travel. My father, for one, I don't know if he's listening, but is feeling more comfortable sitting in his backyard than going on a cruise again, you know, and sort of really thinking of limiting himself. And I'm seeing a lot of that with people. So really encouraging them to step out of their comfort zones, get back into that restaurant, you know, take that trip when we're able to travel. You know, Ontario is opening up soon. So I think these things are important to not forget what made you happy before.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Next question for you is, in your opinion, can you teach resilience, and how has the pandemic made it harder to develop this trait or skill?
I think absolutely you can. Again, I think keeping in mind that it happened to all of us is sort of normalizing, and it gives you a base to start from. We all struggled from the same thing, so that can be really bonding. We also think that children are resilient by the nature of the fact that they're children, which isn't actually true. You do need to teach it to them. Teaching people to be open-minded, teaching them to be critical thinkers. Some of the research also talks about how people who are higher educated have higher scores on resiliency. And I think a lot of that isn't because they studied Plato necessarily. I think it's because their brains have been trained to look at different perspectives. That's one example.
Great. I'd have just another question here for you as well. And how would you address the COVID fog? And what are some of the cognitive therapies for people who have now developed anxiety over re-entry into society?
Absolutely. That's another thing actually that we see an awful lot of is people feeling as though they've lost their confidence. They're feeling as though they don't know how, they've lost their social skills. They don't know how to interact with people anymore. You know, there's no button on Zoom that you can push when somebody's in front of you. So again, I think it's doing those exposure types of things, practicing those skills, role play in therapy, especially for people who are sort of further along in that COVID fog and really having a difficulty functioning, making sure that you are reaching out to therapists so that you are able to get those perspectives.
And I just add, I mean, with anxiety, it's natural to want to avoid things that make us anxious, but that's obviously part of the problem. And a lot of times when anxiety becomes dysfunctional for people, it's because along with the anxiety, part of their coping behavior has been avoidance. And that's why they always say, you know, it sounds a bit trite, but face your fears, which is obviously easier said than done, but that's what would be recommended. And that doesn't mean face everything all at once, but even taking small steps to work towards, you know, re-assimilating yourself to kind of how things were before can be helpful.
The other part of that is with creativity. So if they can get into an outlet to channel that anxiety into something, art, gardening. I think we saw a lot of that throughout the pandemic where people were taking up baking new breads and doing gardening and painting their houses. That the outlet with creativity helps you be more comfortable in ambiguity. So that's the other reason that finding a creative outlet is going to be really important. Singing, you know, we have music therapists within our group, and a lot of those types of things can be really helpful. Exercise, getting enough sleep, people talk about all of that, but it's the active coping that really does build the resilience and sort of encouraging people to step outside of their comfort.
Great. And another question is, how do we spin or address the last 2 years to help our children and teens feel safe returning to school or seeing friends once we move forward into the recovery phases?
That's an excellent question. And again, it goes to meaning making and Viktor Frankl's sort of perspectives on things. Looking at it in terms of what are the positives that you gain from that, and not in the make lemons out of lemonade and the old sort of way of looking at things. But I know my family became better communicators. We were able to draw together and support each other more. So I think each person, meaning making is going to be different for each person. Meaning making is also going to be what you're doing with your kids. How do they understand it? What are some of the gains that they can see? Going back to looking at inspirational figures like Viktor Frankl and Isaac Newton, who were able to, develop their crafts. How can we continue to do those types of things and face the fears?
That's great.
My grandson became an excellent video game player, for example.
I think the key is to try to shift from a sense of being victimized and being a victim to viewing adversity as an opportunity for growth, and to try to learn to embrace challenges, and instead of feeling threatened by them, to kind of like wake up in the morning and shift from a view that many have, which is I want things to be in my flow. I prefer if things are steady. Status quo is my oxygen, to one of, that's really exciting when life hands you some punches you aren't expecting, to kind of embrace those challenges and opportunities and get excited by them and come to expect them rather than to resent them. That's kind of the fundamental mind shift we're talking about.
That's great. And I have one last question here for you, which is, how would you address business owners and employers welcoming back their employees after being off for so long? Would you suggest a phase in or a coping program, or how would you? What would be your take on that?
I think it's going to depend on the businesses. I mean, restaurants, some of our frontline folks, the pieces I worry for them are that delayed reaction. So I think the ongoing supports after, the idea of, we all know people who plan a funeral and then break down a year later, for example. So some of the people that have been on the front lines, I think it's going to be a different need for support that may be more ongoing than some of the other folks that have been home and isolated. And like we talked about, that COVID fog, where they're needing to sort of be exposed. I think it will depend, and having compassion for the workers, but also pushing them past their comfort zones to get back out there and get back in as it's safe. I think that's going to be important.
That's great, guys. I really, really appreciate it.
I just add, I know we're probably very short of time. I just add that, one of the positives many have experienced from COVID is it's really made businesses, many of them, much more open-minded, to use that term, to different technology, Zoom, work from home. And those are either, great things that are advantageous, or workplaces are challenged by employees kind of wanting to embrace those new opportunities and what the boundaries and limits of that will be. So I think those are examples of some of the benefits. Before this extreme adversity, many people weren't open to thinking that laterally or critically, or really seizing those opportunities. Now people are in a position where, because they've had to, they've realized what's possible. So I think that's a really good example. There's no reason before COVID, people couldn't have been more open to Zoom and use Zoom more. People still had relatives, in other places, but that wasn't happening to the same degree now. And it's not just because people were all seeing each other more often. They were more distant. Zoom's kind of taken a life of its own. So I think that's an example of kind of using adversity to find opportunities. And you'll notice speaking of restaurants, you'll notice many places that have outdoor parking lots unattractive parking lots have made those parking lots into outdoor spaces. And even as COVID is improving and people are getting vaccinated, those outdoor former parking lots are so popular, and the creativities that's being displayed with them, they're actually going to keep them, and they're getting permits to keep those outdoor spaces. So that's an example where people were literally boxed in a restaurant or a bar or you name it. And now, because they've had to think outside of the box, and actually what they've come up with is greater than what they had before.
That's great. Thank you both so much for your time. I know, Stephanie, you mentioned that the sun is rising and San Diego is being illuminated. And just as that's happening there on the West Coast of the United States, you've illuminated our topic here today. So I want to thank you both for taking the time and investing and providing us with your expertise in this area. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lisi.
Great. So up next, folks, is Andrew, or as he's known, Drew Perales, the yoga and fitness instructor, certified energy healing practitioner, and Reiki Master 3, life coach, meditation, and breathwork therapy practitioner. He's also a certified metaphysical practitioner, crystal therapist, and personal growth writer from San Diego, California. Drew has dedicated over 10 years to preventative health, whole food nutrition, and healing. He's applied many years of experience and research while also learning from many experts in the fields of health and personal growth. He's also a vocational rehab case manager for students with disabilities. He offers enthusiasm, compassion, humor, and a nurturing environment in his teachings, private healing sessions, and classes. His leading principle is to offer healing to the body, mind, and spirit without perfection or rules. He will be presenting today on breathwork patterning and guided meditation. All right, Andrew, you're up. Take it away, please.
Thank you, Dr. Lisi, for having me. It's what an honor and what a pleasure to be presenting to all of you guys. Thank you so much. Your team has done such a great job to have us all here. So thank you so much, everyone. Welcome, and it's an honor to kind of be here and kind of be the metaphysical practitioner and the holistic wellness practitioner to come and kind of help add to what we've all been going through during this pandemic. And I'm just going to be here for a short, brief period of time so that I can let you know what I did with all of my clients and patients and my group facilitation and my yoga students, how we all got through the pandemic virtually and in person. So I'm not going to be here for too long, but I do want to share some of the things that my modalities and my services have helped people to get through. So I'm going to share my screen here really quick. And we're going to go from here. Okay, so again, this is more topics on what we did, or what I did here in San Diego, California, here in the United States, to help people with their mental health. Because as you know, the pandemic was very isolating and extremely fearful for so many people. And though I am not a licensed doctor, I am not licensed in any way, shape, or form in the medical industry, through my practice, I did work with the general public, and it was an honor and so amazing to watch people go through their journeys and be able to witness and kind of be together, because we were all kind of fearful when everything kind of shifted a year ago. And I didn't realize that through what I was going to be doing, that my healing modalities were going to help so many people with their mental health and the fear that we were experiencing with all of the lockdowns and shutdowns here in the United States. So it was the first time that I ever went virtual, and being able to take all of my practices to a virtual sort of presentation. So I'm just going to go through briefly some of the things that I did. I have 4 different services. And as Dr. Lisi said, I am an energy therapy practitioner, a Reiki master, and I'm also a yoga and fitness instructor. And I am also a provider with Open Mind Health, doing their holistic wellness coaching. So one of the first things that we did, which was really awesome, and people really are not as mindful about their breath work as possible. So one of the first things that I did was I started a breathwork therapy class and breathwork therapy sessions. And it was so amazing to see people within an instant within an instant, just calm down and slow their body down, sitting in a or lying down even, and using their breath work and being mindful. Okay, because we found that the average American, the average human in their work states, they're going to work, they're driving in traffic, they're doing all of these things, they're checking their phone, they're posting on Facebook, they're doing all of these things, and they don't realize that their breath is not being healing. So what studies have found is that the average breath work, or the average breathing that the human does, is anywhere from 22 to 25 breaths per minute, which means we're doing this. We're going from our desk to the coffee machine, to the car, to the freeway, and we're not being mindful. And although I know it's most times impossible to kind of slow yourself down, but if you did once or twice and you slowed that breathing down, you would be able to regulate your heart rate. You'd be able to lower your blood pressure in that very moment and become present. So a healing breath, when you're in like a meditation or when you stop for just a couple of minutes, would be an average of 9 breaths per minute. So you're going from a panting breath to a mindful, slow, deep breath. And that changes the entire nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system. It just affects you in a way that you wouldn't even imagine just by slowing down, even if for just a couple of minutes. It's absolutely amazing what I've seen my clients do. So we did a healing breath. We got everyone down in a session for about 20 to 30 minutes, bringing them down. And everyone can do this in just a few moments. People just don't take the time to do it. So if we can get our breathing down to just going 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out for just a couple of minutes, you'd see amazing, amazing results. Just removing yourself from the outside world. Now, when I talk about the alkaline connection, oxygen is very alkalizing for the bloodstream. So a lot of people know about the alkaline versus acidic content in your blood. When you're more alkaline, you're able to kind of heal diseases and conditions within your body a little bit more. So oxygen is very alkalizing to the system. And I have seen people actually go into a completely relaxed and healing state within their body and mind, just using breath work, simple breath work. And hopefully at the end of this presentation in a few minutes, we're going to just do a little 1-minute sample of what we do in my decompression classes. When the pandemic hit, we had decompression classes that lasted about a half an hour. And I cannot tell you how people were, because everyone was stuck at home, they were isolated, they were scared, and slowing it down helped them be more rational. And the breathwork therapy did amazing, amazing feats of healing just within a few minutes. So you can imagine what that would do if you were to sit down with a facilitator or a practitioner to do breathwork therapy. In that decompression class, we also did guided meditation. Guided meditation is to become familiar with. Meditation, its proper definition is to become familiar with. And it's also withdrawal from the outside senses. And though most people who are new to meditation cannot do it, they think they have to think of nothing. And sometimes that's not always the easiest thing to do. That's why I always recommend working with a teacher or a practitioner or a facilitator to join a meditation class, because they help you do all of the work. Visualization is really powerful. Visualization sort of helps deconnect and take you out of everything that's going on outside of your body. We're talking about traffic, we're talking about the pandemic, we're talking about social media, anything that takes your attention away from the healing of your body, anything that takes your attention away from, getting your mental capacities and your emotional capacities up to a level where you actually feel like you have some control. You feel that ease and that relief and that clarity. And we didn't have a lot of that during the pandemic. So I thought it was really important that I did visualization with all of my students that came into my classes. And it was really quite amazing. People did not want to get up They did not want to get up. They were just like, oh my God, I've never felt this way. And they're saying thank you to me. But really, they did the work. I just sort of opened the door for them. And it was really amazing. And we don't have to always go, into a spiritual space. It's not it's not a requirement to be able to do that. If you can, that is really amazing. But we're talking about the body here. We're talking about the body's homeostatic state so that you find that de-stress. And that is exactly what my de-stress and decompression classes did. So it was really, really, really powerful. And I was so proud of all of my students. And we did them 2-3 times a week to just get them into a space of just calm. And then when they weren't with me, either in person or virtually, they were able to call upon their tools to breathe and to visualize and take themselves out of what was going on around on the outside. Okay. One of the other modalities that I teach is yoga therapy. I'm a certified yoga instructor and a fitness instructor. And this came as a second part to the breath work and the meditation, which I also infuse into all of my yoga therapy classes. So I believe that we have someone coming in who's a fitness coach, and he'll be able to come in and talk more about muscle movement and therapy. But what I do know is that the movement of the body is really important. And when we stay still, it's good. We can get our body to relax. But the thing is, when you're in a fear state, you kind of don't want to move. And sometimes you have to use conscious effort to get up. And so the stagnation of the body kind of helps your muscles to atrophy. Even just the simplest arm movements or bird flapping your arms or doing whatever it is that you can do to move your body is very helpful. Getting around and walking around outside, walking around, the block a few times. But when you apply your body to yoga or some form of stretch muscle therapy, you oxygenate your body, you oxygenate the muscles in your body, and it just overall makes you feel good. There's really no perfection. And that's my rule in my yoga classes is there's no perfection allowed in my classes. And it's really amazing to be able to work with beginners and people who are just so scared to try yoga. And they came into a very accepting environment. And that's the environment that I try to create in my classes. You're breathing, you're getting oxygen to the body. So you're just sitting or lying down doing visualization or guided meditation. You're doing breathing, oxygen, and moving your body. And the great thing about any form, of yoga, whether it be gentle yoga, bliss yoga, all the way up to the more advanced yogas, most times your heart rate stays at a minimum so that you're not in sort of that fight or flight, that parasympathetic state where you're in a state of stress. And yoga really helps with that. So that was one of the other modalities that I used during this pandemic and even to this day. So one of the last things then, and which is why Dr. Lissy and all of the team members asked me to come in here was, for the energy and Reiki healing, both doing it distance virtually during the pandemic and eventually as we opened up a little bit more in person. So I won't go too much into the spiritual aspects of how this helped. What I really want to focus on today is how energy healing and Reiki healing helped my clients get through not just COVID and the pandemic, but, getting them through any sort of stress, any sort of concerns, worries that affects their body, okay? So when you do energy and Reiki healing, you use a guided visualization, and you can do that on the computer with people sitting down, and the physical and emotional and mental benefits of doing that is just like a guided meditation, except myself, the practitioner, is doing a little bit of extra work to sort of help you get into a state and really define and detail what that distance healing is going to be all about, almost to the point where I'm having them imagine and visualize me or the universe in the room with them, okay? And doing that for an hour really gave their body, mind, and soul a vacation from everything that they were experiencing during the pandemic. And the benefits that they received were just amazing. And they took those tools, with them. The mental health, with so many of us, suffering from mental health issues, this gives people a chance to recognize their body and take control, which is what, we all kind of want to do. We have no control about what's going on the outside world, right? But we can take control when we have the guidance, when we have this sort of permission to kind of say, hey, I can take this moment and just calm down and have someone run energy through my body. And whether I'm doing distance healing, that's a little bit different when we're virtual, because then I have them do sort of a guided meditation. But when I'm in person, it really is waving the hands, the body, and the arms over the body, using sound therapy, aromatherapy, singing bowls to kind of bring that body into a high vibrational state. And the high vibrational state is kind of something that we're always looking toward doing, right? Sometimes we feel that we need to be completely healed to feel that. We need to have the car, the bank, money, everything, the jewelry, the titles and all of that stuff. But what we really want, if you think about it, what we really want is the feeling of that. And within energy and Reiki healing, which, side note, Reiki healing is universal life force energy coming through the practitioner and into the client or patient. Most people have heard of healing touch. They do that in the healthcare systems here in the United States. And that human touch, human interaction, the soft voice of someone saying, breathe, let spirit in, breathe, feel your body. It disconnects them, raises the vibration, bring the spiritual effect into your body into a state of unbelievable calm and harmony. And when we talk about the quantum effect, everyone knows about the power of positive thinking, right? So what we do there is we get them to feel how they'd like to feel before the event actually happens. That way they have something more to look forward to. It's absolutely amazing, the benefits that I've seen everyone do. So before I end my presentation today, and thank you all so much for sticking with it through me, I just want to do 1 minute of a sample of the breathwork therapy that I do with my clients. And if you wouldn't mind, just for a few seconds, hopefully you can hear the piano music, everybody. Just gently close your eyes. And I want you to slow your breathing down by gently breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Okay? Everyone breathe in through your nose and gently out through your mouth. We're only going to do it 2 more times. Breathe in, breathe out. Just 1 more. Inhale. Hold it and exhale. Thank you all so much for having me here. Dr. Lissy, thank you for having me here and having a sort of alternative and wellness perspective come in and help with what we have going on. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Drew. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
We'll look, in fact, I almost, with the breathing exercises, I had to kind of give myself a little nudge here to get going, and I was still relaxing, so thank you.
Even in just the shortest amount of time, yes.
So there are a few questions. I'll just kind of reach out to that, and let's see our question. So first one. So other than going virtual, how else have you modified the therapies you discussed to accommodate for challenges specific to the pandemic?
Well, what we've done when I've worked with in-person energy healing, of course, there was a lot of PPE that I had to use. My clients would wear masks, and there would be a hands-off sort of approach. So as the practitioner myself, I would wear a double mask and a protective face shield so that my client or patient would feel extremely comfortable, because there is a lot of breath work that goes on, and there was more of a hands-off approach because the energy is felt through the hands and the body. So that's how we went around that. And a lot of times we would do it outside as well too, seated in a chair in a park or a beach or something. So there's always an alternative to do energy healing.
Great. And reaching out here, next question. For a beginner wanting to enter into breath work, do you recommend it for people suffering from situational anxiety? And can this be done in public, for example, at work?
Absolutely. Anyone can do breathwork therapy. Anyone can do breathwork therapy. Sometimes if we're in a state of high anxiety, like having an episode, sometimes it's helpful to have someone with us as a support, but to be able just to focus on the breathing going in through the nose, out through the mouth, not necessarily doing any patterning. That's really helpful. And what I recommend to all of my professionals who work with me, 9-to-5ers, basically, is if you have a few minutes to scroll through your social media, you have a few minutes to maybe stop off into the bathroom or a back room and breathe literally for just 1 minute. It just takes such a short amount of time.
That's great. Next question for you is, what advice would you give to people who would like to try yoga as a coping strategy during the pandemic, but have hesitations about trying it for the first time at home, for example?
Well, what I would do is beginner yoga teachers like me aren't as plentiful. So what I would do is do some research, and don't be afraid to call up a yoga studio and find out if they offer in-person or virtual, and ask about basically the personality of the teacher. Because I can understand that it's really scary to go in because it can feel very intimidating. But I think it's well within the right of the potential student to come in and ask. It's like, hey, do you recommend a teacher that would be very nurturing towards me or very accommodating towards my specific abilities? That's my recommendation. And hey, why not interview or make a phone call and ask if you can speak with the teacher? Most people are very open to that. So that's what a lot of people do with me. And it's been very fruitful for both myself and my students.
Okay. And next question, can you adapt this to anyone wanting to develop breath work, such as children, for example? Can we reach our children to do this with support if they need a coping mechanism when they return to what is our new norm, for example, when they go back to school?
Absolutely, Dr. Lissy, absolutely. That's a great question. I actually do 3 classes a week working with students with special needs in the school district. And if you're going to do a breathwork therapy, whether in a classroom or outside, what I recommend is seating the students in a classroom style sort of like spread, turning on some music, ringing some bells, some chimes, getting the students to close their eyes and prompt them and coach them through the breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. And I work with students with disabilities, and every single one of them can do it. And it's not something very difficult for anybody to learn. So I recommend it highly for young kids. They love stretching, they love breathing, and they love kind of that difference of taking themselves out of the academics and kind of focusing on their body for a few minutes.
On that theme of young folks and young adults and children, do you recommend yoga for this group? And if so, what type would you suggest?
Oh gosh, I definitely recommend yoga, even for toddlers. And there's no perfection allowed in yoga. And that's the thing that I want to try to get through to all people is there's no perfection with that, and especially with kids. And if the teacher can understand that, then it's absolutely a lot more fun. I think if the teacher can incorporate some fun, the students can do some easy stretches. And we're not talking downward dog or warrior or anything like that, but getting the students to just open their arms, raise it up, fold their head down in half. They love feeling that movement of the body and coaching them through activating the muscles. If we can just say shoulder, chest, neck, back, legs, the kids love feeling that stretch in their legs. They don't know what's happening to their body, but all they know is that they feel better. And it's really amazing. And my favorite pose with the students that I work with is child pose. So they're down on the floor, you've got soft music playing, they tune into that so well. Absolutely.
Great. And for meditation, that what time of day would you suggest is the best time to do that?
Honestly, if we're able to do it the first thing when we wake up in the morning, before we get the momentum started of I have to go to work, I have to put my clothes on, I have to take a shower, I have to drink a cup of coffee. If we can get up before we start thinking about the day, swing our legs over the side of the bed, sit there for literally just 30 seconds to 2 minutes and just kind of focus into the body and breathe up and down for about a good minute, minute and a half, and visualize whatever it is that is not the outside world. I always say, what is your paradise? What is your paradise? Or what does abundance look like to you? What does love feel like to you? What does healing feel like to you? Morning is the best time to be able to do that, and right before you go to bed. But if people are able to take time, during their day, like literally, like I said, with our 9-to-5ers, if you can just go for 2 minutes into another room, block the outside out, breathe, visualize, focus on the breathing only, that's a good time. But the best times would be morning and evening, because you slow your body down in the evening, you wake your body up in the morning.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jude. I think this has been absolutely fantastic and a great opportunity for us watching to pick up some of these techniques to really ground us. So thank you very much for attending, and we really appreciate your expertise.
Gosh, thank you so much, Dr. Lucy. It's an honor. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for listening and watching.
Great. So we'll move forward, and our next presenter is Dr. Markus Ploesser. He's a board certified in general and forensic psychiatry. He's a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, and is also a diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatric Medicine and Integrative Medicine. Dr. Ploesser has completed additional fellowship training in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. He completed subspecialty training in integrative psychiatry through the Integrative Psychiatry Institute in Boulder, Colorado. As such, he is an expert in advanced laboratory testing in mental health, such as organic acid testing, food sensitivity and toxicity panels, as well as organic causes of mental affections such as chronic Lyme and Babesia infections and thyroid abnormalities. Dr. Ploesser has a vast array of clinical interests. His particular areas of expertise include adult ADHD, integrative and anti-aging medicine. He also specializes in forensic psychiatry and evaluations. Dr. Ploesser has a keen interest in addressing mental health via nutritional and lifestyle changes, and will be presenting today on the treatment of COVID-19 long haulers with supplements. Welcome, Dr. Ploesser.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Smith, for the kind introduction. I have learned so much about technology this morning. It has been amazing. And I am very happy to be here this morning. Can everybody hear me? Can people hear me? Yes, they can. Perfect. All right, just making sure. All right, so this presentation will talk about the current knowledge around supplement use for the management of long-haul COVID. The questions we're going to address: what are the most common long-haul COVID symptoms? Why are supplements popular during the COVID-19 pandemic? As well as address current guidance for supplements and evidence underlying their use. Next slide. Most common symptoms of long COVID. Am I still on audio here? Hello, hello?
Yep, we can still hear you very well.
Okay, perfect. So again, this presentation addresses common symptoms of long COVID, how popular supplements actually have been during the pandemic, as well as current guidance with regards to recommendations. Next slide. Recent meta-analysis with 15 studies covering over 48,000 patients showed that 55 long-term symptoms of the COVID-19 pandemic have been identified to date, with the 5 most common symptoms being fatigue, headache, attention disorders, hair loss, and dyspnea. It is not entirely clear what the underlying cause of these varied, often vague symptoms are. However, scientists believe they could be the result of a widespread multi-system inflammation as well as cytokine storm. Next slide. During the pandemic, interest in supplements has increased dramatically, with sales growth for overall dietary supplements skyrocketing to more than 35% in the first week of March 2020. when the coronavirus concerns began to rise in North America. In terms of Google search interest, as well as sales, vitamin C, D, zinc, elderberry favored the most. Interestingly, in different geographic, different search terminology was used the most, which was interpreted by the authors of the study as depending on advertisements and influences, which may have been locally active. So it's all about the celebrities. Major clinical guidelines, such as CDC guidelines and NICE guidelines in the UK, have not incorporated any recommendations around supplement use for new or ongoing symptoms of COVID-19, predominantly due to insufficient research to date. However, a few national guidance documents, such as the one from ODS, have provided updates on the currently available evidence, both COVID and non-COVID related, as a resource for interested parties. The tenor was also that the evidence is insufficient to date and that no recommendations can be issued. Next slide, please. When looking at the evidence in general on supplement use in COVID, regardless of acute stadium of long COVID, it is clear that there's currently a lack of research. A few authors voiced their suggestions on the usefulness of some supplements based on previous non-COVID related research, such as for various vitamins and minerals, as well as herbal supplements. But these suggestions are not backed up by COVID-19 research, and therefore they're only hypothetical. Next slide. However, there's been some research going on with supplements in COVID patients, which I will go into more details now. Just heads up. These studies all concern the acute phase of COVID-19 or risk of infection. They do not report on long COVID. So in other words, there is a scarcity or absence of data. The first supplement I want to talk about is melatonin. It is one of the supplements studied, a hormone produced by the pineal gland in the brain, mainly during the night, and melatonin helps regulate the day-night rhythm. Previous studies have shown that it plays a role in the immune response in terms of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects, and as such, it was thought that it may have an effect in COVID-19. One study that tested melatonin in approximately 27,000 people found that by taking melatonin as a supplement, the likelihood for a positive lab test result of SARS-CoV-2 was reduced by a third, which seems quite substantial. Next supplement I want to talk about is omega-3 fatty acids. So we should have the slide with the salmon and the avocados now up. So omega-3 fatty acids is another supplement which has been studied in COVID-19. These are polyunsaturated fatty acids that are present in certain foods, such as flaxseed and fatty fish, notably cold water fish such as mackerel and salmon. And they are associated with lower levels of inflammatory cytokines and affect immune function by upregulating specific immune cells. When asking more than 370,000 UK residents, as well as 45,000 US and 27,000 Swedish participants about self-reported use of omega-3, it turned out that taking the supplement was associated with a 12% lower risk of COVID-19 infection in all 3 countries. So omega-3, a 12% lower risk of COVID-19 infection. Next slide, please. The effects of probiotics have also been explored in COVID-19. Probiotics are naturally present in fermented foods and act mainly in the GI tract by improving immune function, including enhancing gut barrier function, increasing immunoglobulin production, inhibiting viral replication, and enhancing the phagocytic activity of white blood cells, as well as some benefits on preventing respiratory tract infections in children and adults. One small study with 70 COVID-19 patients found that signs and symptoms, including diarrhea, fever, asthenia, which means weakness, headaches, myalgia, muscle pain, and dyspnea, difficulty breathing, were significantly lower within 7 days in patients taking the probiotic than in those who did not. Additionally, probiotics also reduce the risk of mortality, transferred to the intensive care unit, and respiratory failure. Of note, there are other things we all can do to enhance the diversity of our gut microbiome. And those simple things everyone could do include an exercise routine. So exercise increases the diversity of our gut microbiome, as well as variety of plant-based foods we eat, as each type of plant comes with a different set of bacteria. The next supplement I want to talk about is vitamin C. Vitamin C was popular in supplement sales during the pandemic, has been investigated in a few studies. It is an essential nutrient found in many fruits and vegetables and plays an important role in both innate and adaptive immunity due to its antioxidant effects, as well as antimicrobial and antiviral actions. The research that we have to date appears to be conflicting, with one study in COVID-19 patients under ventilation who took vitamin C supplements having a significantly lower mortality rate than those who did not receive vitamin C supplements. On the other hand, the COVID A to Z trial with 214 adults with COVID-19 who were not hospitalized did not show a shortening of symptom duration after vitamin C supplementation. So evidence is conflicting. Next slide, and next supplement I want to talk about is vitamin D. The sunshine vitamin is also an essential nutrient and has effects on calcium absorption and bone health. However, vitamin D also plays a role in immunity, appears to lower viral replication rates, suppress inflammation, and helps prevent respiratory tract infections. In terms of vitamin D status, some studies suggest a lower vitamin D status was associated with a higher incidence of COVID-19 and a more severe disease, which was supported by a few other studies. But then there were also studies which did not show these results. Again, the evidence is conflicting. Next slide, and next supplement I want to talk about is zinc. Zinc is another popular supplement which has been investigated in COVID-19, which is also an essential nutrient which is widely available in foods including oysters, crab, lobster, beef, pork, poultry, beans, nuts, whole grains, and dairy products. It plays a role in many body processes, including both the innate and adaptive immune systems. A study with 249 patients admitted to hospital found that lower zinc levels were associated with higher mortality rates. Conversely, zinc supplementation did not affect length of stay in the hospital or on the ventilator or ICU. Likewise, zinc supplementation in COVID-19 subjects did not shorten the duration of symptoms. Obviously, all of the mentioned studies are very heterogeneous by design. They have included very different patient populations, administered different doses of the supplements, and measured the effects by a variety of outcomes over different time periods. This for sure in different results in different outcomes. And we need more research to be able to exactly say in which situation, with which patients this particular supplement is effective. Next slide. Again, evidence is scarce, and preliminary supplement use in new or ongoing symptoms of COVID-19 are summarized here. Again, evidence is insufficient. Next slide. And that is a summary here. The current evidence on supplement use in COVID-19 is only beginning to emerge. A few supplements for the acute stadium of COVID-19 seem promising, including vitamin D, vitamin C, omega-3, probiotics, zinc. However, it is too early to conclude in favor of an effect. None of the presented supplements was associated with severe side effects in clinical studies. There is a lack of studies on supplement effects for long-haul COVID. However, evidence from non-COVID studies indicates that there are few supplements which may be of use in the management of the most common long COVID symptoms. Finally, current insufficient evidence does not allow for specific recommendations for supplement use, but warrants considerations taking into account the individual needs of the patient, side effects, and interactions with pharmacological therapies. And this concludes the presentation. And if we move forward the slides, there are a number of references.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent talk. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We do have, it looks like I have two questions here for you. First one I have is, can you speak to the risk versus benefits of long-term use of melatonin? You know, is it safe to use over longer periods of time? Can you become more accustomed to this so that you require increases in its dosages over time, et cetera?
Well, with melatonin, it's I can't speak to the specifics with regards to COVID. However, in general, for melatonin, there are two types of usages, like the low dose melatonin with something like 0.5 milligram or 1 milligram. Can be used to shift the circadian rhythm and would be taken a few hours prior to bedtime. And we think that high dose melatonin is something like 3 milligrams, 6, 9 milligrams, or even higher would be used as a sleeping aid. We also know that melatonin appears to be helpful with regards to management of some cancerous conditions. There is some evidence supporting melatonin use in breast cancer, and it appears to have overall anti-cancerous and anti-inflammatory properties. Insofar as I know, there isn't a risk of using it in higher doses that I know of. And there isn't truly a ceiling. However, with high dose melatonin, we see that dreams can become quite a bit more vivid, and therefore I would suggest caution in a patient population with, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Great.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. And then I have an additional question here, which is topic of probiotics. You know, with some of the evolving research around COVID itself, you know, which strains have been primarily studied with respect to COVID, if any, and any insights on that? Which ones should people be looking at?
I don't know of any data specifically with regards to long haul COVID. However, we do know that there are a number of nutritional as well as behavioral factors that increase the diversity of the gut microbiome. So with an increase in variety of plant-based foods, we know that the diversity of the gut microbiome changes, and we do know that exercise increases the diversity of the gut microbiome. The evidence is much less clear for a probiotic supplementation. And another discussion in the field is with regards to the use of prebiotics. So in other words, fiber supplements that are thought to increase gut microbiome diversity rather than taking a pill with living strands or spores of probiotics.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for providing all of these insights. It's really fascinating. I know there's so much out there, and especially in the commercial realm of some of these products. It's nice to tie that to some of the evidence that's out there. So thank you again for your time, and thank you for speaking with us today.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Great. So let's shift gears and let's move on to our next speaker. So I'd like to welcome our next speaker first. It's Dr. Paulo Porto de Melo from Sao Paulo, Brazil. So we're off into the Amazon here, and he's a collaborator in the discipline of neurosurgery at the University of St. Louis in the US, and a research group in robotic microsurgery at the University of Strasbourg in France. Additionally, he's a member of the World Federation of Neurosurgical Societies. After graduating medical school at the University of Sao Paulo, he followed up with a medical residency in neurology and neurosurgery Dr. Porto de Melo also has a master's degree in which he researched telemedicine and did a postgrad at Harvard where he developed expertise in innovation, leadership, and management of complex health systems. His career is focused on developing, implementing, and expanding the use of minimally invasive procedures in neurosurgery. His latest innovation is the endoscopic endonasal treatment of cerebral aneurysms, performed on about 30 patients worldwide and only 3 in Latin America, where he is the only neurosurgeon qualified to use this technique. Not only that, but he is the director of this specialized technique at the World Society of Robotic Microsurgery. This treatment promotes much less invasion and brain manipulation, allowing the patient to recover very quickly, be at less operative risk, and leaves no apparent scar. Welcome, Dr. Porto de Melo. And you can go ahead and start up your slides when you're ready. And just checking out there, Dr. Porto de Melo, if you're hearing us there, if you can go ahead and start, that would be helpful. That would be great. Go ahead and start your slides up and just making sure our connection is there. And go ahead and start your audio as well, just in case you have it on mute.
Hi.
Great, okay, I can hear you there now. Perfect.
Just tell me when I'm live, okay?
You're live now, go ahead.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Paulo Porto de Melo, and I'll update you about the COVID situation here in Brazil. As most of you may be aware of, Brazil has been affected severely by this pandemic, and part of the situation is due to its location as a hub to America, to Latin America, and so we have I'm sorry? Well, continuing, so Brazil, especially São Paulo, is the main hub for connections for international flights, and this has put Brazil as a huge target for COVID-19. Up to now, we have about 500,000 deaths and about 16 million people affected by COVID. Brazil is a large country, as you know, and we have a population of about 220 million people. A lot of concentration here in the southeast, among São Paulo, among Rio, but the main crisis started in a city at the north of Brazil, call it the Gate of Amazon. It's called Belém do Pará. Belém do Pará, we have basically, it's a local center for medical facilities where patients are treated from all over Amazon. And in March of 2020, we had a collapse of the health system. So we had a lot of patients simultaneously, and there were no hospital beds to receive everyone. And this led to doctors to an innovative approach, treating patients with repurposed drugs, as ivermectin, as hydroxychloroquine, and in an outpatient regimen, because simply we didn't have any beds left. And it turned out that in about 2 weeks, the situation was controlled at March 2020. And later on, about a month later, we started to open things again. And in the Pará situation was normalized about April to May. But this, of course, spread to the rest of Brazil. And at the end of the year, of last year, we had the appearance of a new variant of COVID, which is called the P1 or Amazonic variant, that was much more aggressive and that turned from initial phase to inflammatory phase much faster also, and got a lot of younger people than the first crisis in March. This second wave has finished about 1-2 months ago, and now we're seeing, of course, still a lot of cases, but we're decreasing the rhythm. And this, of course, is due not only to the treatment, but also to vaccines, which are now currently available here at Brazil. We have 4 different vaccines here at Brazil. Among them, we have Pfizer, we have Janssen, we have AstraZeneca, and we have the vaccine from Sinovac, which is called Corona. The main issue that I would like to outline here is that I heard from a patient not a long time ago that survived COVID. And he told me, hey, you know what, doctor? People talk a lot about how many people died and how severe COVID may be, and the care you must receive at hospitals and all the things that are a consequence. But I survived, but kind of not survived, because I'm not the same I was before COVID. So my thinking is much slower. I can't focus. I have headache. I had hypertension, but now my blood pressure is normal without medication. So I'm a different person now. So nobody talks about us, the people who survived, but are different now. And I feel like I can't return to my previous occupation. And what should I do? I was the one that ran food to my family. I was responsible for all family, and now I just can't work anymore. This shed a light on an important facet of this disease. Of course, we have to worry about the acute phase. Of course, we have to worry about patients that may progress rapidly and die or need respiratory assistance. But we have a much bigger problem which can affect not only the family of the person who is ill, but also countries, because this disease gets a lot of people who are economically active, and by not returning to their previous occupation, it can affect the gross internal product of countries. This can affect the whole economy. So, speaking of post-COVID sequela, usually it lasts at least for 3 months. The neurological system is very, very affected. It's one of the main targets of this COVID-19. And it gets almost from every part of the nervous system. So you can have a peripheral nerve disease like ecosthesias or paresthesias. You can have anosmia or parosmia, up to problems with complex thinking and executive functions. What we do soon after COVID ends, after the virus is killed from the body, is to do a comprehensive checkout. So we check lab, check Doppler, almost every vein, big vein of the body to prevent thrombosis. And of course, we follow these patients on outpatient clinics regularly, even if the patient doesn't complain about anything, because sometimes he just figure out that he is still ill, not acute illness, but is facing chronic problems. Here at Brazil, if we have cognitive problems secondary to COVID, and we do MRIs and CTs, and everything is okay with the brain. I mean, anatomically okay. Then we start to put the patients at a program of cognitive training. So he goes first for a neuropsychological evaluation, which can detect which facet of the cognitive is affected. If it's attention, if it is focus, if it is mathematic thinking or language. And then we design a program to train this patient again and try to get back to his previous status. Sometimes when this is not possible, we evaluate also his vitamins, his micronutrients, and if that's everything okay, we can have pharmacologic assistance of some drugs here that help the patient to focus and to gain attention. We use a lot here when, of course, observe from affected once a day, especially in the morning, so it's up. And we try to use it for short-term treatment because the vast majority of cases, this kind of investment is only short-term, so it lasts between 3 and 6 months. But still, as I told you, we have almost a third of the kind of problems. It will be about 5 million people, 5 million economic active people. So it has a huge social impact and also economic impact for families. And of course, we have to deal also with problems because of the confinement and the restrictive measures that are implemented by governments. And these, of course, a lot of shoulders. We have here at Brazil now almost 1 year of schools working on a mixed way. So divided the classroom, half of the classroom receives online activities while the other goes to school. And the result of that is a huge increase in psychological problems in children. Also, children that are not going to school regularly, they put a burden on the parents that need to adjust the work schedule to deal with this new reality. And of course, all of this has economic impact, right? So not only the patients who are still ill, this kind of constricted measures by government. As a matter of fact, there's a study, and Professor Georgian, he states that lockdown measures, they are even worse than the disease itself. So we have verified this in Brazil. It can slow down progression and disease, but we still have to deal with a lot more economic impacts and, of course, quality of life impacts over the population. So my final message for you guys is that we must face COVID not only as a health issue, but also as a big economic issue. Sometimes when we consider lockdowns, as we had many here in Brazil, we can see that the consequences are worse not only on psychological side, but also over diseases that just are not treated anymore because people are afraid of going to hospitals or to clinics. and even for the economic side of the country, which reflects in poor nutrition or people stopping paying their medical insurances, and of course, less medical assistance, medical quality assistance. So this is the situation here. Nowadays, we are decreasing the number of cases, but still there is some trouble.
That's great, Dr. Porto Melo. We're gonna just step in just for our timing purposes, just for any closing thoughts or comments, and we appreciate your time.
I'm available for questions.
Okay. Well, have a few here. So, in your hospital, when patients come to you, they've survived the COVID experience. What types of supports or therapies do you offer them to avoid any setbacks in their medical care? Say they're coming to you for a different reason, for example.
Right. So we aim giving integrative support to patients. So they are submitted to a nutritional evaluation, and also for respiratory physiotherapy, and also from psychological support. We try to do this. I'm on a private practice here in Brazil, so of course this isn't the public service practice. This kind of treatment is not available to all, unfortunately. But that's the aim. The goal is that.
And this is a question I'll make personal for you. And a busy neurosurgeon neurology practice. The height of activities in Brazil. How are you coping, and what do you do to avoid the COVID burnout situation?
Well, that's a good one. My practice changed a lot since the beginning of the pandemic. I run a hospital here, which is a national referral center for neurosurgery and for neurology also. And we had a huge impact because the number of surgeries has decreased dramatically, right? So maybe today we do a third of the surgeries we used to do. And we had to come back to basic textbooks and study neurology, virology, and all that again, because we simply had to aid our colleagues, because it was a huge number of patients. So it doesn't matter if we were neurologists, oncologists, hematologists, or whatever. We were doctors, and we need to study back the basics to engage on the front line of care. On the first moment, it was really tough because I was leaving what I love to do, which is operate, right? But the way I deal with it is that it got me connected to the basis of why I intended to be a doctor in the first place, which was helping people. And treating people with COVID made me really reconnect to a huge number of patients through this basic principle. And every patient that I avoid going to mechanical ventilation gives me today as much satisfaction, as much pleasure as when I operate or clip on anything. So that's the way I found to deal with this.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and it's always helpful for all of us here, especially in a symposium that's a holistic approach with different perspectives, that we get the opportunity to have a perspective from your area of the world. And so thank you so much for taking the time to do that, and it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much, and for all of you in Canada, and for all of you who are watching us, resilience and success.
Great. Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to take a quick break now. There's a video that will play for you. It's 7 minutes in length. We'll see you right after that.
Recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has created unprecedented challenges for healthcare providers. An interprofessional research team from Georgian College, Waypoint Centre for Mental Health, and the Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre collaborated on ECHOS. We explored healthcare provider wellness and how the pandemic was influencing clinical practice and interprofessional collaboration. We also asked about the types of education and support that would assist with pandemic recovery. The study included participants who worked in either a large psychiatric hospital or a large acute care community hospital. 239 healthcare providers completed 5 different standardized tests to assess depression, anxiety, and stress, work-related quality of life, resilience, anxiety about COVID-19, and loneliness. 30 people were involved in one-to-one interviews, and 88 people completed open-ended online questionnaires. The results tell us that about half of the healthcare providers are doing well in coping, while the other half are struggling with anxiety, depression, low quality of work life, and low resilience. The ECHO study revealed that a significant source of distress came from witnessing the devastating effects of loneliness, mobility restrictions, social distancing, and PPE on patients. The infection control measures also limited the supports healthcare providers could give to each other. Work can feel like a grind without these informal social structures. This is compounded when healthcare providers go home and must cope with fear of spreading COVID to their families and deal with added family responsibilities such as homeschooling. The ways that policies were communicated and the policies themselves had unintended and negative consequences for healthcare providers. Healthcare providers wanted to use their expertise and contribute to policy development, implementation, and evaluation. They were certain that their expertise could ensure that the least restrictive measures were taken, which would mitigate some of the harmful effects of the policies. Healthcare providers also want to engage in health system innovations and education to create new methods of delivering care. Interprofessional respect and collaboration became stronger during the pandemic. Interprofessional collaboration is a strength that can be leveraged during health system redesign and pandemic recovery. Addressing the profound effects of the pandemic on the practice environment can assist healthcare providers to restore health and wellness and meet patient needs. The ECHO study has implications for leaders and policymakers. Empathy strain can lead to burnout, and healthcare providers require support to address this. Recognizing the interconnections between the patients and healthcare providers' experiences is an important first step. Healthcare providers need support to develop additional therapeutic competencies to address new and emerging patient care needs. Interprofessional collaboration is a strength here. Ensure that those closest to the patient care can share insights on care design and policy. Engage in regular assessments of healthcare providers using standardized testing to monitor wellness and the effects of any initiative aimed at improving the situation for healthcare providers. The duration and intensity of the COVID-19 pandemic have created a remarkable strain on the lives of healthcare providers. They cannot escape witnessing the effects of the pandemic restrictions on patients, colleagues, and family members. The isolation, mobility restrictions, PPE, and social distancing create a heavy load for healthcare providers. The suffering, loneliness, physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion can feel devastating. All the while, healthcare providers are striving to give excellent care to patients and remain accountable to their professional commitments and obligations. This is amplifying the effects of the pandemic on them. The ECHO study revealed that healthcare providers are experiencing empathy strain. While empathy is crucial in healthcare, it is critical to maintain the self-other distinction. Practicing self-compassion is crucial to ensure you can have empathy for others. Self-care practices themselves can feel like another item for the to-do list, but a concurrent study revealed the powerful effects of brief mindfulness practices on building resiliency and reducing burnout. An antidote to empathy strain is self-compassion. Self-compassion is a practice and an act of goodwill and invites us to speak to ourselves as we would a friend or loved one. To assist healthcare providers with the struggles associated with empathy strain, we are offering an evidence-based solution shown to assist people to develop resiliency and wellness. Perhaps you can try this strategy today. Today, we invite you to use 2 or 3 moments of hand hygiene to take a self-compassion break. Speak to yourself in the same kind way you would a friend or a colleague. Gift yourself a compliment for the efforts you put forth today. Remind yourself that your best is enough. First, pause for a moment and consider the kindness, care, and compassion you have been providing your closest colleagues when they experience a stressful moment, encounter the death of a patient, or grieve the restrictions imposed on providing compassionate care. What are the things you think, say, and do in these moments to show your care and compassion to colleagues? In these moments, do you believe they've done their best and that their best was enough? Now, hold yourself in this same kindness, care, and compassion. Believe that you did your best, that you did enough, and that you are enough, just as you are. Thank you for the care you provide to yourself and the care that you are providing to patients.
Great, thanks everybody. Welcome back. Our next presenter is Tyler Sari, a passionate fitness professional and first-place international fitness competitor. He is a certified health and fitness coach, mental health and wellness advocate, nature photographer, and conservation enthusiast. He has practiced health and wellness as part of a holistic lifestyle and taught the same tenets to his clients for more than 15 years. Tyler has researched the positive effects of exercise and nutrition on mental health, adopting a holistic approach to wellness. He connected with the powerful benefits of exercise and nutrition as they unfolded in his own life, leading him to become an advocate and counselor of both physical fitness and mental wellness. He helps his clients recognize and release limiting beliefs to identify their true potential because he believes mindset is the catalyst to a healthy life. Welcome, Tyler. And Tyler, if you can unmute yourself, then you can begin. I can see you there, Tyler, and hear your background noises there. Go ahead if you'd like.
Sorry? Oh, you just want to test my sound?
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you now. You can go ahead and start. Thank you.
Oh, we're starting the presentation?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All right, so everybody can see me, everybody can hear me?
Yes, everyone can, yeah.
All right, amazing. Before we do anything, I know this day and age, this is how most people, if not everybody, is doing their meetings. Still, I know a lot of people are going into the offices now and going back to somewhat the way things were, but I think a lot of people are learning to work this way. So before we do anything, I just want to get everybody, if you can stand up, great. You can also do this sitting. It's one of my favorite stretches, and it's really easy to do. I suggest people every 30 minutes, if you're sitting a lot, if you're on your computer all day, like a lot of people are, all you're going to do is stand up or sitting down, like I said. You're going to take a deep breath in, open up, turn your thumbs back, inhale nice and deep through your nose, and then you're going to exhale, and you're slowly going to round forward and turn your hands the opposite way in. So I just want everybody to do this just a few times. There's no way to really do it wrong. I can show you from the side here. So as you come forward, you're going to kind of round and turn your hands towards each other. And then when you come back, you're going to inhale, turn your thumbs back, and breathe in. I mean, I want to get everybody moving. That's part of my whole philosophy, because now more than ever, everybody's sitting, and inactivity is a crisis. And I think COVID has only exacerbated the whole inactivity crisis. So I suggest, if you can, try and get up and move. And that is a great basic stretch you can do, like I said, sitting or standing. Today, I'm going to be speaking kind of my own experience and what got me involved advocating for mental health. So I'm going to speak on some breathing techniques and different things, but I think sharing your story, and that's what kind of got me involved with the mental health advocacy is really important. So I'm going to put a primary focus on the first at least 5 minutes speaking on my own experience and kind of my story, like I said. So at around the age of 19, I was still in college at the time. I got involved in competing in fitness modeling. And on my first slide here that's coming up, I believe there should be some photos that'll show what I looked like. I think it's the next one here. Yeah. So, I mean, I look ripped. I look like the epitome of health in a lot of people's eyes, probably. But as you can see on that one photo, looking fit is great. But if you're sacrificing your mental wellness along the way, it's not a great thing. And that's exactly what I was doing. But taking it back a little bit further, when I was growing up, I grew up in a broken home, and I had learning disabilities. And all throughout my public school, as well as my college experience, they would give me extended test time, which actually didn't help, and take me to a different room. And I had all of these, what they deemed learning disabilities, especially when I was in high school and public school. And what really was the catalyst looking back and got me advocating for mental health is when I started working out at the age of 14, 15, about 2-3 years into taking it serious and paying attention to what I ate and my exercising. Looking back, and in that time frame, that is really when I guess I started to really hone and be able to adapt and make myself pliable to what was actually going on around me, because I had severe ADHD my whole childhood. And I didn't recognize it at the time. It was unbeknownst to me, but working out and exercising and putting all my energy towards doing that, which at that time I wanted to look like Arnold. So I was in the gym a lot. I didn't realize the impact it had on my mental health. And that's what really got me started to do some investigation on the impact exercise has on our mental health. Now, like I said, around the age of 19, 20, these photos here you see is when I got into fitness modeling and competition. So these photos, that was one of the first shows I won with the shaved head there. and a pierced nipple, which I have neither of those at the moment. As you can see, my hair is a little bit longer, and my brain health is probably a lot different than I was there, because not only was I overtraining, but I wasn't feeding myself the proper nutrients. So I wasn't doing, although I look probably super fit to a lot of people's standards, I was dying internally on the inside, essentially, because overtraining physically and under nutrition wise, I was depriving myself. So it took a lot of going through this experience to learn and adapt and take more of a holistic approach to my overall wellness, which is what I try to preach now to a lot of people, because I had to learn the hard way. So I competed probably from around the age of 19 when I was in college to around 25, and I did a lot of fitness shows and fitness modeling and shoots for sports companies, etc. And I was, at the time, I thought I was doing great, but I was really dying on the inside. And like I said, not just physically, but mentally. So when I looked back, when I started competing and doing all these things and manipulating water intake and to look a certain way, I thought at the time it was great, but then I just look back now and I really realized the detrimental impact it can have for superficial reasons. When you're at that age, I know people now, even in their 30s, 40s, 50s, that are just entering these stages, and I try to speak to them and let them know the impact it can have. And yeah, so I guess we can move on to the next slide. As you can see, actually that photo on the right was in 2009. That was one of the biggest shows in Florida that I had won at the time, Model Universe. So like I mentioned, we have an inactivity crisis going on, and a lot of people, I just wrote COVID-19, maybe even 25, because a lot of people are reaching out to me now, now that we can work outdoors in Toronto, at least, telling me they can't wait to get started because they've put on a lot of weight through the last almost year and a half of being stuck inside. And a lot of people have endorsed fitness and eating healthy, but I think more people have just become even more inactive than ever, which is unfortunate, but it goes hand in hand when you can't really leave the house. But one of the reasons you can leave is for exercise. So in a sense, it is a good way to get people outside, endorsing exercise. And I've always been an advocate of getting outside in nature and working out, because as we know, it's not only good for your physical being, but your mental state, your mental well-being. I like to tell people to keep things, if you're just getting back into it or you haven't worked out much in your life, remember that it's not just about intensity. So many people have this mindset, they're going to go super hard, they're going to work out, they're going to eat right, but it doesn't last. And it's only for a 6 to 12 week window for a lot of people. And that's not a lifestyle. That's a short term. It's kind of like what I did when I was training for fitness shows. You go really hard for 12 weeks, you look great, and then you can't maintain that because it's not maintainable. So what I try to tell people is consistency. So even if you're doing something small every day, you be consistent with it. So if you live in a condo, take the stairs. It's just those little things that really add up that a lot of people don't think about. But if you do it on a daily basis, it really starts to add up. And you don't have to make things complicated. This day and age, a lot of people they see on Instagram and social media, some trainers or people with influencers doing the craziest, hardest workouts. And they think that's what they need to do for results or to become a fitter version of themselves. When in reality, a lot of these people are essentially just showing off, and these aren't the workouts they're actually doing. It just looks good for social media. So I like to tell people to check in and really think about what they're doing, because it's not about the most complicated exercise. It's about what you can do and being consistent with it. And another thing I wanted to touch on is just in this whole activation phase, which is part of my presentation, muscle activation. And when we have issues with our body, imbalances. I've experienced my own imbalances, and something I'm currently going through COVID is I haven't really been lifting weights at all. I've been building myself up from the ground up, and my movement patterns and kind of retraining not just my mind, but my body and how I function, because all I did from a young age was pound weights and try to put on muscle. And in that process, I created a lot of imbalances. So I am big on teaching people how to really isolate and learn about muscle activation, because it's really important in getting the most efficient, making your muscles work as efficiently as possible. So at the bottom here, no gym, no problem. I've always been, like I said, an advocate working out outdoors. So a lot of people think they need special equipment, they need a gym setting, but you don't. Like, if you have your body and you have the outdoors, you don't need much. You can utilize a park bench, the ground. A lot of the workouts I do, I'm just starting another boot camp now. It's all body weight based and mobility based, because I'm a huge advocate of, as you age, focusing almost just as much, if not more, on your mobility than just working out and resistance training. Because as you age, especially balance and pelvic floor training, which we're going to talk about, and all these things that people don't think about as much because they think about just lifting weights and resistance training, is equally, if not more important. We can move on to the next slide now. And we're going to do I'm going to go through a few breathing, not techniques per se, but things you should do. And then we're going to do a 1 minute, just focused on all of them. So diaphragmatic breathing, it's when you breathe through your diaphragm. So down here in your deeper lower abdominals is where you should try to emphasize on breathing from. But unfortunately, in our society, a lot of people breathe through their chest. So with this technique, I really want you to put one hand on your chest and one on your lower abdominals, like I mentioned, when we go through it, to see where you're actually breathing through. And the other thing is nasal breathing. So as we know, it's a shorter distance to go through our nose, to breathe through our nose, than it is through our mouth. And not only that, you get rid of toxins and everything when you breathe through your nose. So I'm a huge advocate now of really trying to focus on breathing through your nose. I would not tell you to go to the extent I have, which is where I've actually taped my mouth shut at times when I'm working out, to really see how much I breathe through my mouth. And that's a little extreme for some people, but I wanted to test to see how well I can actually nasal breathe. So the second thing here, diaphragmatic breathing, nasal breathing, and pelvic floor training. So I have had knee surgery, and I've actually had some spine issues the last year and a half. So I have been delving into really learning how to engage the pelvic floor more than ever, because a lot of people, women are big on knowing about the pelvic floor and how to kind of get it working and isolating those muscles, but men, not so much. A lot of men in general that exercise, they have more of the macho stereotype where they don't think about these things because they don't need to. They just worry about how they look and how big their muscles are. Not everybody, but a lot of us, especially when we're younger. So pelvic floor training. So really learning how to isolate all of your strength. I always say this is derived from your TVA. It's known as your transverse abdominis. So the muscles that are really deep in your pelvic floor, and learning how to really activate them is really important, especially if you want to be strong overall. So what I want us to do just for 1 minute is really try the analogy for pelvic floor. The muscles, this might sound a little weird, but the muscles that you use to basically shut off your urine. So imagine if you were midstream and taking a pee and you needed to stop. Those are the muscles you want to learn how to activate, and that'll initiate the process of isolating those muscles in your pelvic floor. And another analogy, which is even a little weirder, I should say, is imagine you had a marble and you're sitting on it and you're trying to pick it up. Now, just think about that in your head for a second. That is what you want to imagine you're doing when we're doing this breathing technique. So you can go to the next slide, but I think that's all we have for breathing. I just want to actually go through this breathing technique with you all. So what you're going to do is bring one hand to your chest. It doesn't matter which hand. One hand to your lower abdominal region. And what you're going to do is try to breathe through your nose, like I said. Try to eliminate the mouth breathing. And try to, when you exhale, think about what I was saying about the pelvic floor. So shutting off the urine or picking up a marble. So you can close your eyes, you can keep them open. We're just going to do this for 1 minute. And actually think about this 1 minute. It can be a meditation, it can be whatever it is, but try to focus on your breathing like you do with meditation and see where you're really breathing from. And if you can isolate your pelvic floor. So is your upper hand moving? Pay attention. Or is your diaphragm, the lower abdominals moving? If this hand is moving more, then obviously you know that you're breathing more through your chest, and you should try to emphasize more of your diaphragm. So just focus on breathing. I'm going to do it with you now for the next 30 seconds. So just breathe in deep through your nose. Exhale. And as you exhale, try to focus on that pelvic floor activation. Now, the reason I like to get people to learn how to do this is because when you are exercising, you want to engage these muscles because they're really important. And a lot of people, when they work out, they just go through the movements. They don't actually think about the mind-muscle connection or what they're actually doing. So if you can learn how to isolate your pelvic floor and then further it by engaging it when you're exercising, you're going to get so much more out of it. So we can move on now to the next slide. I am big on nature photography. You can move on. Yeah. So these are just some photos I've taken. These were actually, if you go back there to the photos, I'm an advocate for conservation and getting out in nature, not only when you're working out, but I do it for photography purposes. And this is what really got me on the whole kick of being outside, being grounded, being one with nature, and how it's good for our mental wellness in general. So I'll just explain these photos quick. The last 3 years, I've been really into photography. I was even did my first show a year and a half ago at an event here in Toronto. So if you see that frog, that real close-up photo, before I even had a macro lens, so you can imagine how close I was. That photo on the left was after I was laying in the mud with that frog. So as you can tell, I have no problem really getting down and dirty, literally, with nature. And the photo below that is really what got me emphasized really loving macro photography. So as you can see, there's a spider, and that the fly there is probably 3 times the size of it, and it just started eating it, which I thought was pretty cool. And the photo below that, some Rocky Mountain sheep. So that's what actually got me started with photography in general, because I had went out to the West Coast. I was in the Rocky Mountains, and I didn't know much about photography at the time, but I always had my camera with me. And I captured that moment. And that's just what really got me into photography and nature and loving it so much. And the other photo there of the beetle, a lot of the stuff, now this is what I was talking about, is when you get out in nature and kind of, you focus on the things that you don't normally see, and kind of get lost in your creative juices. That's when they start flowing. So a lot of people, if you look, I don't know how close you can see that photo, but you can see the teeth on it. You can see the pinchers. It's pretty cool. And when I've actually been to the point when I'm taking these photos that I jump, because I'm looking through my lens and I actually get scared for a moment, because you're so up close, it looks like you're actually in their face, which it sounds funny, but it's true. The photo below that is, or above that, is just some dew on a tree that I took, and it's just showing you how to embrace things that you don't normally notice or you might not pay attention to. We can move on to the next slide now. So like I mentioned, while you're out in nature, so slowing down and being grounded, and so there is a Japanese art of, it's called Shinrin Yoku. So it's forest bathing is basically, and grounding are proven to lower inflammation in your body. And I think it's really important, just kids these days and adults, we're always in shoes. We're never really one with the earth, especially now. If you live in the city like I do in Toronto, we're never really out in nature or have our shoes off. And that's why even in my boot camps, I endorse people taking their shoes off, given the ground is obviously clean and everything's good, and really becoming more grounded with nature, because it's so important, not only for our physical health, but our mental health. And just slowing down, like I said on here on the slide, and enjoying and taking in like everything. And when you do this, you'll just, you pique your curiosity, and you just your joy, wonder, and excitement, everything, the things that day to day you just don't allow yourself to think about or do. So when you're there enjoying nature, just really thinking about what is going on, you can close your eyes or keep them open and just try to acknowledge the things that you normally wouldn't, and taking into consideration the breathing and everything I've already mentioned. It just brings out it lowers your stress, obviously, and it brings out your creative side. So I think we might be close to the end here. We have another slide. Yeah, so this just goes back to your thoughts, your feelings, beliefs, and attitudes can positively or negatively affect your biological functioning. So just, people don't really realize that their thoughts create emotions, create feelings, and it goes vice versa for our body, for our mind. So just keeping that in mind, that your body affects your mind affects your body, and vice versa. I think that might be it.
There's a few questions here for you. First of all, just the first question is, why do you think some people struggle to get into regular physical activity? Is it time commitment? Is it lack of knowledge of what to do?
I think why I have a lot of clients, I think this will answer the question pretty simply, is accountability is one of the hugest things, as we know, in life. And a lot of people, they want to make the time, but a lot of people, they have to make the commitment to somebody. So as a personal trainer for a living, I know that a lot of my clients, they have the goodwill and they want to exercise, but they really have to allocate that time into their schedule, and they have to make it a priority. Like anything, if you don't make it a priority, then it won't happen.
Yeah, that's great. And a follow-up question here is, how has the pandemic influenced representations of wellness and fitness on social media platforms?
I think it's brought to light that like a lot of careers now, that you can really exercise anywhere, which is great. And it's opened up a whole new way of coaches doing business, because I know of a few people who own gyms, and in Toronto, they haven't been able to obviously open their gyms basically for over a year now. So they've adapted to the new way of doing things and doing things online. And I think it's great in a way, but I also like to say that personal training is called that for a reason. So the personal one-on-one experience, you can't fully recreate that, but I think it is a good thing that you have the option now to do this whole online training that everybody has been doing the last while.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you for sharing your expertise, and also, thank you for sharing your love of photography. I think that's great to see. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
So we'll move on, and our next presentation features an interdisciplinary research team from Georgian College and Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. Join me in welcoming Dr. Sarah Hunter, faculty researcher from Georgian College, and from Waypoint, Dr. Soyeon Kim, research scientist, Nicole Adams, research analyst, and Nicole Mace, organizational development consultant. Together, this team has explored the efficacy of a brief online mindfulness intervention on healthcare worker well-being during COVID-19. Let's hear from the team now. When you're ready, team, you can turn your mics on and you can begin. Thank you.
I am a researcher and at Georgian College and a program research and innovation lead at Mindfulness Without Borders. And I'm the principal investigator on the study that we're going to be sharing with you today, where we investigated the efficacy of a brief online mindfulness intervention on reducing healthcare worker burnout during COVID-19. I'm joined today by my colleagues from Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. Nicole Mace is the Organizational Development Coordinator. Nicole Adams is a research analyst, and Dr. Soyeon Kim is a research scientist. To set the stage and contextualize our study, we thought it was important first to share the common understanding of mindfulness in a Western secular context. So perhaps the first image that comes to mind is somebody meditating in silence with their legs folded. However, as awareness about the concept of mindfulness expands, there's a greater understanding that mindfulness can be used and accessed at any time and anywhere. When presenting our research findings today, it's important to note that mindfulness is not synonymous with meditation. Rather, mindfulness is about present moment awareness through orientating and connecting to one's internal and external environment. So as Jon Kabat-Zinn, medical doctor, often credited for bringing mindfulness into Western medicine, describes mindfulness as a practice that involves focusing awareness on the present moment and accepting and acknowledging one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations without judgment. In essence, it's about cultivating awareness and paying attention, with attention, to the present moment, in the service of self-understanding and wisdom. The practice of mindfulness really invites people to cultivate an open-mindedness or a curiosity to the present moment. As Dr. Beach and Stephanie so eloquently shared at the onset of this conference, being open-minded through cultivating self-understanding and self-management, foundational pillars of social and emotional intelligence, can really improve one's ability to cope with adversity. Now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Nicole, who will share Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care's mindfulness journey.
Thank you, Sarah, for that lovely introduction. Waypoint's mindfulness journey began while implementing the National Standard for Psychological Health and Safety many years ago. Within this mental health strategy, there was a focus on training specific to building resilience, which led to the introduction of a mindfulness program, the Mindfulness Ambassador Program, which was developed by Mindfulness Without Borders. And also it involved having a sustainability plan by having internal facilitators. The graphic here in front of you right now speaks to COVID-19 and Waypoint's response to COVID-19. The graphic here captures a three-pronged mental health strategy. And within that strategy, you'll notice under promotion, that's where mindfulness sat. Mindfulness has been an integrated part of Waypoint's wellness programming. It extended into patient services and has been adopted as part of the leadership model. So it made sense to use it right now in response to the pandemic to support the mental health of our employees. So why mindfulness? Well, as I noted, it was already firmly embedded, and it's more than simply relaxation. Mindfulness is an evidence-based practice that supports awareness, both social and emotional, and supports growth. It allows us to make space for emotions without judgment, to remain curious, and then choose how to respond. Most importantly, the practice is simple. It has a diverse applicability, and it's highly accessible. We have our breath with us right now. Mindfulness is about training your brain, giving that workout for the mind, and trying to pay attention in the present moment. So it made sense to take the current programming and transform it into something we could use during COVID-19. So how did we retool the program? The retooling started with taking a face-to-face program and making it virtual. Yes, the pandemic stopped in-person training, but virtual allowed us to be accessible. It allowed us to reach those healthcare workers all across Simcoe Muskoka in hard-to-reach places who work shift work. The retooling took that MAP program that originally was 12 weeks and 12 hours long and condensed it into a 2-hour model over 4 weeks' time. That's 10 hours less. The content included emotional awareness and empathy, the basic breath practice as a staple, periods of reflection, a longer practice, and self-care strategies to walk away and integrate to build healthy habits. There are follow-up communications, linking participants to valuable resources they could use to maintain their practice. The goal of this 4-week program was to wrap participants in compassion, caring, and experiential learning to feel the effects of mindfulness. It was intended to be a space to fill your cup and walk away with strategies that were easily usable and applicable. And the mindfulness skills taught were very purposeful. For example, mindful listening was taught to engage the senses, to ground us in the now, to use listening to help with our conversation skills in a time where it was very tricky. Mindful movement was used as a tool to use to transition from work to home or home to work, or to deal with anxiety in those long lineups we stood in the beginning of the pandemic. This new tooled program was over a 4-week period in short bursts, so 30-minute durations. So this was intentionally making it manageable and meaningful, and to create a pattern and a habit. Now, the facilitators were live to support engagement and compassion to the participants and to help them feel like they weren't alone. The course allowed caregivers to have time for themselves. On to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Nicole. So in this study, participants were asked to complete 3 surveys at 3 different time points. So the pre-survey was administered before the 4-week program began, the post-survey right after they completed the program, and the follow-up survey was given 4 weeks after they completed the program. By doing this, it allowed us to measure for any significant differences between the surveys and if there were observed effects and were they sustained. In the surveys, we asked questions pertaining to their demographic information, which was included in the pre-survey only, and questions on their burnout. So to assess for burnout, we included the Maslach Burnout Inventory, the MBI, which is a 22-item scale designed to measure 3 aspects of burnout. The first being emotional exhaustion, which is feelings of being emotionally overextended and exhausted by one's work. The second is depersonalization, which is an impersonal response towards recipients of one's service, care, treatment, and/or instruction. And third is personal accomplishment, which is feelings of competence and successful achievement in one's work. So in this study, a total of 131 healthcare workers participated in the study, and 93% were women. 53.8% of participants were between the ages of 31 and 50. And 53% worked directly with patients, and 64% had no previous mindfulness experience. In the program, healthcare workers were asked to voluntarily practice mindfulness on their own time. As such, we included a question that asked participants how often they practice mindfulness independently from the program. And participants reported practicing mindfulness 1 to 3 times per week in both the post and follow-up surveys. So 65% in the post and 69% in the follow-up. I'm now going to hand the mic over to Dr. Kim to go over the findings.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for the beautiful description of our methodology and the measures for the burnout. Like Dr. Beach highlighted at the beginning, COVID-19 is increasing the risk of the burnout in healthcare workers. As you may all know, burnout is really endangering patient care stability, and therefore is our priority to target and reduce those burnout in healthcare workers during the pandemic. I would like to show you the status of the burnout for healthcare workers in our region. As you can see here, most of the healthcare workers are experiencing high level of emotional exhaustion. The emotional exhaustion would include some items like feeling emotionally drained, used up at the end of the workday. So we can see that nearly half of the healthcare workers in our region are experiencing emotional exhaustion. However, the majority of our healthcare workers are feeling low level of depersonalization or cynicism. Items such as work is hardening me emotionally, more callous towards people for the depersonalization category. So we can see that although the healthcare worker is experiencing emotional exhaustion, they're less cynical towards the work and towards the people that they care. At the same time, 40%, almost 40% of our healthcare workers are feeling accomplished. So in this category, items like I can easily understand how others feel, deal very efficiently with problems at work would be included. So yes, although our healthcare workers are emotionally exhausted, they are feeling less cynicism and feeling accomplished, which may reflect the valuable contribution and commitment of our healthcare workers towards the patients and people working with them during the pandemic. Using the average scores, we see similar results. We can see that in average, our healthcare workers are within the category of moderate, almost high level of emotional exhaustion, low level of depersonalization, and moderate level of personal accomplishment. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'd like to show you whether there was a time change in these three aspects of burnout after the 4-week mindfulness program that was delivered online. As you can see in this graph, one is the baseline before the 4-week mindfulness program. 2 is immediately after the program has completed, and 3 is the follow-up, which is 1 month after the completion of the program. You can see with the red asterisks that compared to baseline, after the 4-week mindfulness program, healthcare workers felt significantly less emotionally exhausted, and this trend has maintained after 4 weeks of the completion of the program. Next slide, please. And here you can see a similar trend with the depersonalization. So in terms of cynicism, healthcare workers felt less cynical after the 4-week mindfulness program, and this has extended after 4 weeks of the program completion. Here you can see an interesting graph. This may seem like there has been an increase of personal accomplishment after the 4-week program, but unfortunately, that was not a significant change. So there was no significant change in terms of personal accomplishments after the 4-week mindfulness program. So in summary, almost half of our healthcare workers felt high level of emotional exhaustion. The 4-week skill-based online mindfulness program significantly reduced emotional exhaustion and cynicism in healthcare workers during the pandemic. So the impact of the abbreviated online map for reducing emotional exhaustion and cynicism remained low after 1 month of the map completion.
So after receiving all this rich information, you may wonder where to go from here. So let's keep this really simple. Collaboratively support access to service, whether you're a frontline worker or whether you're an administrator. Just start the conversation and get mental health on the agenda and talk about how you can bring services like this 4-week MAC program, which is available to your staff, to remove barriers and build awareness and make self-care a new norm. For frontline healthcare workers or for any healthcare workers, commit to just one small step. So that commitment might look like asking a colleague to practice with you the breath practice for 90 seconds on your next shift. Just any small step to practice. We're not after perfection. We're just after practice, 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 and build and instill the habits. So let's just take a moment and practice gratitude. As we come to the close of this presentation, I just want to ask you to take a moment and reflect on one thing right now you can be grateful for. And I'll share with you that I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here today with all of you, to share in this moment, to talk about mindfulness, to be excited about mindfulness. And I'm thankful for the collaboration and the funding that supported this study and for this amazing team that I've had the opportunity to present with. Together, we're truly stronger, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Great talk, team. We've got a question here. How can family members of healthcare workers offer their support and help prevent burnout?
That's a great question. And I mean, I don't mind jumping in here and asking anyone to layer in, but you can offer them support by simply listening and sitting with them and talking about what they might be willing to do to try to get some help, and validate their feelings and just be a simple listening ear and practice with them.
I'm not going to chime in. I'll give a second there just to see if anyone else will chime in. Next question is, what advice would you give to parents who are experiencing a disconnect with their children due to differing perspectives about the importance of following public health guidelines such as social distancing, especially as restrictions continue to lift?
I'll begin with this and give space for my colleagues as well to layer in. As a parent, I definitely empathize with that question that's been asked. And one of the big pieces and components of the mindfulness program that was used at Waypoint, the Mindfulness Ambassador program, is perspective taking and, having brave conversations and holding space for differing perspectives. So I think, that's a big component of mindfulness practice, is listening without judgment, and kind of awakening that beginner's mind and a curiosity about what a child is sharing and what another human is sharing and how they're experiencing the lifting of restrictions and the desire to be in other people's company. And then through that, listening and open-mindedness, perhaps sharing your own perspective and holding space for their perspective. And I think some of us would also share the desire to practice this practice together. So practicing this practice with children and helping them take other people's perspectives as well. And anybody else want to layer in?
Well, I can share based on not this project, but the current project that we are currently conducting through Nursing Code is Wellness Hub. It's like providing this 12-week mindfulness program to use in adolescent children and adolescents. We heard very positive testimonials from them, from those who completed the first group, that sharing emotions, sharing what they're going through with people who care for each other has been really helpful for them. That in this situation that we are socially disconnected and isolated, I think having the platform to really share the emotions and validate what they're going through with other peers is really important. And definitely this mindfulness program provides that space to exchange their feelings, what they're going through with their peers, and also in a safe place with the facilitators that give them the comfort to share their emotions.
That's great. Great, thank you, team. That was great talk, great insights, great work on that. And I know with all of our frontline workers in hospitals and in other facets of our community workforce, this work can be leveraged and used very effectively. So thank you so much. And we'll move forward then, and to our next and final speaker for today is Dr. Marcia Kostenuik, who graduated medical school from the University of Toronto and now is on the board of directors of the Medical Psychotherapy Association of Canada. Dr. Kostenuik is also a member of the Canadian College of Family Physicians and the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. Dr. Kostenuik has over 20 years of clinical experience across emergency medicine, family medicine, urgent care, and medical psychotherapy. Additionally, she has years of experience as an educator, writer, and speaker. Currently, Dr. Kostenuik has a private medical psychotherapy practice with a specific interest in the health and wellness of physicians. She has developed and teaches multiple online courses to help physicians better manage stress, anxiety, prevent and overcome burnout, improve work-life balance, and be more effective in their relationships with their children, partners, and patients. Relevant to today's event, she has been addressing acute stress reactions during the COVID-19 pandemic by developing a set of psychological first aid tools. Welcome, Dr. Kostenuik, and we look forward to hearing your presentation on the psychological toolkit for dealing with COVID-19.
Thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure to be here, and I got to enjoy hearing some of the earlier speakers, and so pleased to be here at the end of this great day and building upon what everybody has been sharing already. So I think, as you mentioned, the toolkit, why don't we actually start with that practice? So the psychological first aid tool that I created as soon as the pandemic started, I really thought, what are we going to do? I knew physicians were already burned out before COVID, before we heard the word COVID. And also patients were having long wait lists to get mental health support. And also this issue of normal stress reactions to a very abnormal situation. So I quickly put together this idea of bringing things like mindfulness, evidence-based practices that I know work with individuals who are burned out or experiencing anxiety and panic, and make them accessible to everybody, and also package it in that emergency medicine, first responder kind of way with a mnemonic. So all you need to remember is ABC 1, 2, 3. And I'm actually going to walk you through the ABC 1, 2, 3 right now. So I like to take a nice, comfortable, deliberate posture the way you would for any mindfulness practice. And let's start with A for awareness. So just at this present moment, can you bring awareness to your body and notice your arms, notice your hands, notice your legs, and become aware of your feet planted firmly on the floor. And now be aware of your whole body as if you're witnessing yourself sitting there. Next, I'm going to guide you through 3 rounds of box breathing where you'll breathe equally in, hold it in, and breathe out and hold it out. So after your next exhale, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold it in, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold it out, 2, 3, 4, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold it in, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, hold it out, 2, 3, 4, breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold it in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Hold it out. 2, 3, 4. Now C is for count. I'd like you to look around and count 3 things that you see. So just see them directly through direct observation. No need to even make any judgments. So just notice, for example, I see a pen and it's black. So notice 3 things that you can see and really take in your visual experience. Now, continuing with C, count 3 things that you can hear. I'll have to be quiet for a moment. And if you notice silence, just notice that. Again, we're looking for your direct experience of hearing. So count 3 things that you can hear. And now counting 3 things that you can feel. Maybe you feel your clothing on your skin or the air on your cheek or yourself seated on your seat. So count 3 things that you can feel. You can even reach out and touch something. If it suits your environment, you can also count 1 thing that you smell and 1 thing that you taste. So I'm going to taste my tea. Coming back to our senses, direct experience of the body and the senses. Next is 1. So what is the 1 next thing for you to do? Right? Not 1,000 things, but can you focus right now on the 1 next thing? So right now it might be to continue this practice, or maybe after the session's over, but you can do this in your day-to-day life. What's the 1 next step? Very specifically. For me, it's usually to make some eye contact with my kids and give them some attention because I've been working a lot. 2, what are 2 strengths that you have? 2 things you're good at, maybe things that help you get that 1 thing done, maybe things other people notice that you're good at, could be an internal strength or something external available to you. Maybe something you've learned from past stress or difficulty. So what are 2 strengths, if you can call those to mind? Next is 3 thanks. 3 things you're grateful for. They could be very small, maybe the ability to breathe on your own, if indeed you can. Maybe that you have some food in your pantry or somebody to talk to. So call to mind right now 3 even very small things that you're grateful for. Great. So that's the ABC 1, 2, 3 tool. And now I normally in groups, I like to get a sense if how you're feeling and know that there's no right way to feel. Many people will feel grounded and centered and calmer, but it may not be the same for everyone. And that's a practice you can do every day on your own, or something that you can guide someone else through, a patient, a friend, a family member, a child, a teenager. I've done this with my teenager and just not told them I was doing it and helped guide them through, told them I was trying to help a bit, and they said it was extremely helpful and they were able to go to sleep. Some people have used it to help their insomnia. It can be used at work when there's a feeling of anxiety or panic. So many potential uses. So hopefully you're seeing my screen share there now. I don't have anyone to give me a thumbs up, but nobody's stopping me. So I'd like to share with you some ideas about burnout, and I'm trying to keep track of our time because I know our timing has changed today. So I'll try to go through this fairly quickly, and I am doing a session on the Recharge program for burnout, and that's a free session coming up this month. All these resources are on my website, that ABC 123 tool. You can download it for free, the PDF, print it, put it up on your bulletin board at work or in your bathroom on the wall or behind the door, as has been suggested by some people. So many of us are feeling pandemic fatigue, tired of restrictions. As we said, children are tired of restrictions. And we're feeling exhausted. Also this immersive multitasking, so people who are working from home, everything's happening under one roof. My kids' music lessons, karate lessons, my husband working from home, and myself as well. So we're trying to do everything in the same space. So in terms of burnout, burnout was first described in the 1970s by a psychoanalyst in New York, and he noticed he was becoming very cynical. I know there was some research presented recently, and it was very much a female population. So interestingly, there is a gender difference. Men tend to have more cynicism, and they had low numbers of cynicism, and they had a female population, which is what I would have expected. And females tend to get more emotional exhaustion earlier. And I'm really interested in what the early signs are, because I want to help prevent and stop this from happening. So he noticed a lot of cynicism and also the physical ailments and loss of ability to concentrate. So burnout, what is it exactly? The ICD code is called, so those codes, it's not a mental disorder, so to speak, and it's not in our DSM criteria, which is used in psychiatry, but it's considered an occupational phenomenon. And as talked about, there's the three areas. So emotional exhaustion and depletion, the cynicism or feeling kind of dissociated from work, not connected anymore, and reduced efficacy, which unfortunately can lead to errors. And errors can be another cause of stress and further burnout. You already heard about the Maslow burnout inventory. I've linked this article to on my website under the tab burnout, if you want to go ahead and take the full inventory yourself and see where you stand. But what I think is most important, I think a lot of those symptoms are very late. And as an emerge doctor, I always like to catch things early and catch the earliest warning signs, not wait until it was too late. So this article from Scientific American talks about a 12-stage model of burnout, and I find this extremely helpful. What I think is most important are those first three: this compulsion to prove yourself, working harder, and neglecting needs. So you can see that you can get a high level of personal accomplishment because you love your work and you're all in and you're doing everything, but you're doing everything for everybody and juggling a lot of balls, and you might be setting yourself on the path to burnout without even realizing it. And I think this also might explain what the first presenters talked about of delayed responses, because the nervous system has taken a beating, but we don't know it yet. And I'll give you some ways to find early warning signs for that. So I kind of like to think of burnout in three key areas to help you think, what could you do? What can you do today differently to help insulate yourself from burnout or get off that path from burnout, or recognize that you keep going down it and what you might do to stay off and to stay safer. So we've already talked a lot today, I think, about stress response, and I won't dwell on it, but just realize that stress responses are different for different people and different scenarios. So if you go into fight flight, you may need calming and breathing and mindfulness and meditation and certain types of yoga like yin yoga or yoga nidra, which is something I'm also offering this month, a free session on yogic sleep, which is very calming. Or maybe you freeze and you flop and you shut down. In that case, you may need activation. You may need to get more physical and outdoors and active and walking and moving and use behavior activation and scheduling. Another reaction people have is called fawn or appease, where we actually, this is a big problem, we go along with things. We keep taking on more work. We're afraid to say no. We're afraid we're going to be rejected or looked down upon. So learning how to say no is a huge part of burnout prevention, in my opinion, and in my work in my clinical practice. So amygdala hijack, you may have heard about. Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, describes how this amygdala, the fight-flight part of the brain, gets activated and it sort of shuts down that prefrontal cortex, the part that's important for logic, empathy, intuition, response flexibility, really important things. So when you say to your kid, what were you thinking? Often they weren't thinking anything at all. Or people will say, I was out of my mind, right? This is often what they mean. Or Dan Siegel calls it flipping your lid. So people kind of lose it. And we're hearing about those stories right now. So how can you quiet the amygdala? And I think you've learned some things today about how to do that, including mindfulness and mind-body practices. And the ABC 1, 2, 3 that I showed you is another way of doing that. So mindfulness will actually truly create resilience in your brain in terms of thickening the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex and actually shrinking and reducing activation in the amygdala. There's a lot of caveats around the amygdala I won't get into, but very interesting to see research is showing, the neuroscience is showing this. In 1992, the Dalai Lama challenged the neuroscientists to study their brains, and they did, and that was the beginning of finding that this is actually, it's like a workout for your brain. So this is pretty amazing. And some of my trauma patients will say things like, I'm shrinking my amygdala as they're doing their practices. So they know it's actually having a real effect on the brain. Your calm is contagious, so that's why it's so important for you to do your own practice. I teach a lot on parenting, but start with yourself first. When you are calm, your children are going to feel much calmer, and all the things you learn, you're going to be modeling, and they will start to be able to do that more easily and readily as well. So we've already done the ABC practice, and I'm glad we got that in because that was most important for me to show you. And like I said, please feel free to download those tools and use them and share them. The ABC should help quiet the amygdala. And then once that prefrontal cortex is coming back online, you can use more cognitive skills. Often we jump in too quickly trying to solve problems and give people solutions, and they're not ready yet. We haven't quieted things down. So the box breathing is an evidence-based practice as well. And I see our host is back, so I don't know how much time, if you want to show me with fingers even how much time I have, that would be helpful to me. But we've already gone through ABC, so I won't share anymore. This is really important, resilience. I think there's a lot of myths around resilience, and the wrong notions around resilience, I believe, are actually causing burnout. So resilience, that idea of bouncing back, we need to actually allow time to bounce back. So if we don't stop the stressors, there's no ability to bounce back. So this Yerkes-Dodson curve shows that the more arousal we have in our nervous system, we can increase performance. But when it goes too far, we actually fall all the way into exhaustion and burnout. So I like people to work in that zone where they're not overtraining. And you learned about that today as well. So what most people seem to be talking about, in my opinion, is increasing performance, trying to get you to do more with less and work more and take more roles on. And this is just simply not healthy. It's not a matter of you not being resilient. In fact, it's the resilient people who tend to take that on. So I don't want to make you a superhero, and there are personality traits that are going to make people much more susceptible to burnout, and I will show those to you in a moment. So I think of this, we talked about athleticism today, and I agree. I think this is the same with burnout. We're overtraining and exhausting ourselves and not even recognizing it. We need to set limits, just like athletes do, good, healthy athletes at 16 years old who know they need sleep, they need rest, they need breaks, and not to overtrain. And workplaces need to start recognizing this. If we're careful, we can have longevity. This is an 80-year-old bodybuilder. I don't know, maybe she was overtraining, but she's lasted a long time. And I want all of you to last a long time and not overtrain. And the overtraining curves look exactly like that Yerkes-Dodson curve, and that what I think is overperforming in a lot of cases. And we're also sending people back too quickly after burnout or when they're on that path to burnout. I would say it's often 2, 3, 4 times more time off or resting than what people think they need. And this is very hard to break through because often they are workaholics. So perfectionists, workaholics, superhero, we think we can change and do everything, and Lone Ranger, meaning we don't look for help. So Dyke Drummond's website, The Happy MD, talks about these personality traits. I think he's hit the nail on the head. These are super important. And burnout, who does it happen to? The best perfectionists, people who take on a lot of roles. They're highly resilient, they're adaptable, they keep growing and changing and being creative. But because of that, they've taken too much on. And this is something that I see over and over again clinically. To the point, I call it a work use disorder, not workaholism, so that people take it seriously. They're often in denial and they thank me later. Thank goodness, Dr. K, that you stopped me, because they were in denial and didn't realize how much they were doing, and they didn't want to stop because they're getting satisfaction out of their work and they love it. I asked my husband, why don't you stop me? And he says, you're very hard to stop. So I would espouse all of those underlying personality traits. Bertrand Russell, Nobel Prize winner, said, one of the signs of an approaching nervous breakdown is the belief that one's work is terribly important. You get it, right? Not that it's not important, but terribly important. He gained perspective. He's a polymath, brilliant man, highly successful, but he had perspective. John Steinbeck said, now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good, right? Understanding how perfectionism can get in our way. So in therapy and in coaching, we can help with those personality traits, have greater understanding. Mindfulness will help as well, and become more self-aware. I don't have time to get into these, but there's a whole bunch of other things I see with burnout, including intellectual giftedness, people who are highly sensitive and highly empathetic. All of these can be wonderful traits, but they can lead people to take on too much and not be able to set limits. I teach all of these skills to groups and individuals and in coaching and organizations. I teach a mindful parenting course, and I find the results are that people, it helps in all of their relationships, in all aspects of their life. So this is really key. There's links to a lot of free resources on my website for meditations, mindfulness, yoga, interpersonal skills, communication skills, even emotion regulation skills. So please spend some time looking at that if you want to get some resources that I find to be extremely valuable. Learn how to say no kindly. I tweeted this the other day. I think it's so important that we know how to say no without feeling mean or rude. And there are ways of doing it. Being grateful to be asked for something, but being very clear that we are not going to be doing it or not able to do it. And maybe in a year or 2 years, or when a position comes up again, you'd be interested. But learn ways to say no kindly with a healthy assertiveness. Maybe someone in your life is a good role model of that, and you can practice doing what they do. Finally, the system. So any of you who are working at a system level, organizational level, maybe 80% of burnout is related to system issues. So we don't want to blame the victim. We want to understand what are the system variables. I talked to a doctor the other day, 2 of them, they were working 80 hours a week and 100 hours a week. My husband said in his company, it's apparently illegal, or it's just completely not allowed to work more than 60 hours. Pilots, same thing. Why are organizations not only encouraging this, they're rewarding people for it, which is part of the superhero complex, and they're expecting it. And what they should be doing is saying it is not allowed. It's totally unsafe. We're burning out our best. So when I work with individuals, I think of this truck and I say, how much have you piled into your pickup truck and what can we unload? And how fast can we get that unloaded? Anything that can go has to go as quickly as possible. And the system level, what's holding you up, right? What's supporting you? And what are you doing in terms of sleep and self-care? But 80 hours, 100 hours a week, you can't even fit in mindfulness. You could, but it's kind of cruel. I mean, I still would if I could, but it's not the right message, right? We need to say no and set limits, and organizations need to help champion this. So who's burning out? Often the physicians who are most resilient. We're losing our best, and they're people who are running the show and juggling a lot of balls. So this is a truck with extra wheels on the back, right? It can hold even more. So what do? Pile more on that one. Most trucks on the road are overloaded. This is from an engineering scientific journal, and people are actually cutting the cord, the electrical cord that tells the engine that it's overloaded. So it's supposed to say you're overloaded, don't start the engine, and they cut the cord. They cut the electrical circuit. And I think we're doing the same thing. We're not feeling the full load. We're not acknowledging it. And we keep running and we keep going, and nobody's stopping us. Nobody at work says, weigh in. Nope, you're overloaded. You're going to have to take a break today, or let's take some of that off. They're letting us do it. And I'll say it one more time. Often we're getting rewarded for it. This is part of the personal accomplishment piece and part of what I think needs to change in our culture. We should reward people for taking a break and living a balanced life. So reduce the load if you can. I won't go into that more. And if you're in a system role, please look at this at an organizational level. The skills training that I love doing, I think these things are highly valuable. Teaching assertiveness, limit setting, how to say no kindly, parenting skills, relationship skills, emotional intelligence, all of this stuff really helps. There's evidence to show which ones work and don't, so try to use the ones that are working. These are a couple series I'm offering this fall. I'm planning to do series all of this year, which are online groups, interactive. I get to meet people, I get to know them, I get to help coach them through this and see their results and see where they're having difficulty. One, the Finding Stillness is more calming, including yoga nidra and mindfulness. And the Recharge program is very practical. I'll show you a few points on that, and I'm doing a session this month. Yeah, if you would like. So lots of things you can do. In my recharge session I'm doing for free this month, you're welcome to come and I'll have more time to share these things with you, but recognize those signs, unload, take breaks to recover, and strength training. So I don't think I'm going to have time to really show you the rest of this, but I'll start thinking about taking questions. But just so you know, connecting socially is very important. Connecting socially outside of work is one of the key steps in the recharge program. Recognize your limits, stop ignoring the overload, and become aware of your body and emotions. A few last things I'll just show you. The Welltory app is going to show you your heart rate variability and gives you some feedback on that. And I use this to judge if I'm overloaded or not. I use auto sleep to judge how my sleep is doing. Set limits, check your real calendar, be honest. Often it's a lot busier than it looks, and start slashing where you can and making room for your loved ones and for sleep and the important things in your life. Learn how to say no, learn how to do it kindly. There's all sorts of other options for limit setting, but I think we're probably out of time. So I'm going to go until he stops me. There's a few more things. So I use all of these limit boundary setting tools at home, timers, sound machines. I tell people when I'm busy, I tell them when I'm done, so they'll come and get me and let's play tennis or let's go for a walk. Otherwise, I'll work straight through. Take breaks every 15 minutes. I use the Plum Village app and the mindfulness bell. This really helps me to remember to take limits. Every hour, get up and move. Every day, every week, every month. You see what I'm getting at? Think of breaks in that way, small little breaks and also bigger breaks all the way up to sabbatical and taking an extended time off. These are ways to recharge from burnout. Burnout resolves with a change in work and a change in your workload. Whereas depression, PTSD, they do not respond in the same way. So that's very interesting. So again, lots of free resources, a few favorites I'll just run through as we finish. I love Headspace. A lot of people like Calm. Insight Timer is really neat, 10% happier. These are apps you can use right away. I like the Muse biofeedback headband that gives you feedback as you're meditating. Lots of fun. I like the M-Wave biofeedback, which does cardiac coherence breathing, similar to the box breathing, and you get this wonderful feedback on how it's working. So if you like gadgets, those are fun. Track your steps. My steps went down in 2020, but they've gone way up now, better than they were before the pandemic. So tracking things helps you. Yoga with Adriene is free. She's wonderful. Everybody I talk to likes Yoga with Adriene. So please feel free to check out that free link. Again, it's on my website under the yoga tab and Yoga Nidra as well, the yogic sleep. So remember, have a life outside of your work. It's crucial. We need to have hobbies and interests beyond our work. And I've had to take my own advice here. And I've recently picked up golf again. And wow, it's wonderful. Getting out in nature, as Tyler said, is so vital. And just remember, work, 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 work. All work is a recipe for burnout. Please make some space to savor what you already have in your life and look at your priorities. And hopefully you will, in this way, stay off the path to burnout. So again, feel free to connect. I've got on my website, I send out a newsletter about once a month, and I send out links to free sessions. If you're interested, feel free to join. And if you need to reach me, you can email me and I would try to answer any questions you have. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Kostenuik. That's fantastic. A lot of great tangibles there and extremely helpful and great final talks. Greatly appreciated. Questions from others. Let's see. We have... what advice would you give to those who have experienced imposter syndrome at some point throughout the pandemic?
Great question. This comes up so much. I've had so many interesting different views about imposter syndrome, and I've heard from psychiatrists and specialists. And I think my view is this relates to ego and sense of self, right? And kind of the idea of elevating and lowering. If I neither elevate myself nor lower myself, then how could I be an imposter, right? I'm an equal human. And I saw a video once, a YouTube video, and there was a lovely African-American singer, and they said to her, "Aren't you nervous to go on after this famous singer?" And she said, "Are you kidding?" She said, I can't match her queendom, and she can't match my queendom. And I loved that. And I feel that we can sidestep imposter syndrome through that. Maybe it is deeper work of mindfulness, but to realize we all belong. Who belongs less or more than me? How could I be an imposter as a fellow human on this planet? So I know that's not the typical canned answer, and I've heard that it's ADHD and it's this and it's that, but that's the way I view it. I hope that that's the deepest work that I do, is called intersubjectivity, that we're all equal. That's my worldview, and it's different talents, different abilities, different strengths, different weaknesses. I have so many weaknesses and strengths, and they're just different than somebody else's. And there is no imposter here. I'm with you. We're together. So that's my answer.
Thank you. And some of your toolkits and strategies, we've seen some of the websites, we can get some of that information and whatnot. As any other integration with some of the family health teams in Ontario? Or?
No, I would say the quick answer would be no, but reach out to me, anybody who would like to. If there's anything that I can help connect you with, or any of the kind of teaching and programs that I like to run, I would be happy to connect with them. But they do, some people like the MBSR program, mindfulness-based stress reduction, John Kabat-Zinn's 8-week program, and Kristen Neff, Mindful Self-Compassion. I've linked that work on my website as well. I think it's excellent. So there's things people can tap into, but I'm sorry, I don't know if the family, what they're doing in their group, but I'd love to know if anyone wants to reach out, please do.
Great. And I think there's one more question here, just getting pulled up here for me. It's coming there. So can you speak to guilt-centered around feeling as though you are not doing enough, specifically the guilt of actually successfully achieving an outside of work life?
Yeah, this comes up a lot in individual groups. I was saying I stayed almost an hour and a half late with a group at the end of a conference yesterday, and we all got to talk, and it was wonderful. And I wish I could sit and do that with all of you. This came up quite a bit. Some people use this technique where they always want to serve others. So they learn that, well, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. So if I, take care of myself, therefore I'm taking care of others. So I call that going through the front door. It kind of works. It's the way you think and operate already. I prefer for you to be able, again, to just be yourself and own this, and to take time out just because it's living. It's really living, not because, well, it's everyone else first, or now it's me first. And I always tell my family that it's not, I'm going to put you first and now me first. The needs and wants of all of us matter. So I think of it more as realistic. Would you want to fly on an airplane with a pilot who just worked a 100-hour week with no breaks and wasn't sleeping well or eating well? I don't want to work with that, right? So you don't want to be that person who's going to burn out and be exhausted, and we become irritable and we become sometimes dangerous in our work. So I think of it more as life-saving, like oxygen in the emerge department. Like, you need it in the sense that you need it to stay alive, to stay well, to enjoy life and to enjoy the people and the work in your life. But also mindfulness, meditation breaks. It's just to be enjoyed, to learn how to let go. I called it the popcorn experiment. I realized I couldn't sit down and eat some popcorn without feeling I had to put in a load of laundry and cook. So it took me practice. So I practiced and practiced and practiced until I could just sit down and eat some popcorn and do nothing else. Or I encourage you, just sit down and enjoy your coffee or tea tomorrow morning or this afternoon, and don't do anything else. Actually drink it while it's hot, not like me where you forget it in the closet and it's cold and you don't remember what you've done with it. So yeah, I would encourage you to, in mindfulness, we feel the guilt and think, where is this guilt coming from, right? And it's a compulsive thing, this compulsive need to work. Again, it gets into ego and sense of self. But if we realize we're of value just as we are, even without working compulsively, we start to be able to let it go. There's more to life than work and proving ourselves. Remember step 1 on the path to burnout? Compulsion to prove oneself. So yay, whoever answered that question, you're getting yourself off the path of burnout today. You're getting off of step 1. No need to prove yourself. You already are, and you can sit down and read a book and take a break. And if you can't, because you have a 100-hour work week, this is time to unload.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Really appreciate your insights, and we look forward to reaching out to some of those resources that you provided there as well.
Thank you so much, and wishing the best to everybody. Please stay safe and well, and we're getting through this, and I hope you feel the hopefulness in my voice and in everybody else's today. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for the 6th Annual Georgian Bay Healthcare Wellness Research and Innovation Day. Another different year like last, not seeing all of you in person. We hope that you have enjoyed watching our live stream format and the variety of our fantastic speakers. Again, I'd like to thank our incredible speakers joining us from around the region, around the world. Thank you for sharing your expertise and unique perspectives on such relevant areas of interest stemming from our year coping with this pandemic. Thank you to our partner organizations who have brought you another Georgian Bay Healthcare Wellness Research and Innovation Day. Thank you to our team here at CGMH and ROMP who have helped to make the displays, the innovation and the research initiatives, as well as their help alongside the CTRE with the live stream technology. Thank you, folks. This day would not be possible without the many hardworking people who have worked behind the scenes in organizing and supporting another successful day. Today's sessions are recorded, so if you or your colleagues or neighbors would like to watch the presentations from today, they'll be posted on the Rural Ontario Medical Program website, which is displayed on the screen now. Remember to check out the storyboards, research posters, and recordings from past events, which will continue to be available for viewing, which will also be up on the Rural Ontario Medical Program with the ROMP website. We also would like to encourage you to fill out a short feedback survey, which will be sent to you soon by email and is also available in the description of the YouTube live stream. We greatly value your thoughts on today's event and would like to know what you think. There's always an opportunity to put in these recommendations for future speakers, as well as ideas for the next Research Day theme. This year's theme was chosen based on your responses from last year's survey, so don't hesitate to share. Finally, to our health professional teams here in South Georgian Bay and to all of you joining us worldwide, thank you for all that you do and your dedication to quality care and medicine and health and wellness during the pandemic. We hope that you will join us next year, hopefully in our usual format of in-person and live stream for 7th Annual Georgian Bay Healthcare, Wellness, Research and Innovation Day. Thank you again for coming and have a great rest of the day.